My father is an online sensation, praised by everyone as the most admirable homeroom teacher. He was also my homeroom teacher. During our final year of high school, he asked me to help look after a kid with a limp. Since his family was poor, I started bringing him a hard-boiled egg every day. I tutored him diligently because his grades were poor, but then things took a turn. He started spreading rumors that I had a crush on him, accusing me of harassment, and begging me to leave him alone. To make matters worse, a video of me leaning in while he pushed me away somehow ended up online. My classmates, unaware of the truth, mocked me for putting on an act and having such peculiar taste. My father, with a dark expression, ordered me to go home and reflect on my actions. My mother took me to the little cripple's house to confront them, but we were both pushed and fell from the building. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day my father told me to help the little cripple. The bell for our senior year class had just rung. My father strode purposefully to the front of the classroom. Class, our student Harry has been having trouble with his legs. Recently on his way home from school, he took a fall and injured his other foot. He's just starting to recover now. To prevent something like this from happening again, is there anyone willing to help look after him and walk with him to and from school? Everyone turned to look at Harry sitting in the back row. But no one said a word. As he slowly raised his head, the classmates averted their gaze again, some pursing their lips, others shaking their heads. Harry was short in stature with a disabled left leg that made him walk with a pronounced limp, yet his skin was unnervingly pale as someone suffering from some incurable disease. What's more, he spoke very little and had this intensely peculiar way of looking at people. It made others instinctively keep their distance. Soon, hushed whispers began circulating among the students below. One, damn, who'd want to help a freak like that? Walking with him makes me feel like my life's in danger. Ugly people always cause trouble. If you can't even walk properly, just stay home instead of making problems for the whole class. Tisk, let someone else deal with him. I'm not getting involved. The sight of him makes me lose my appetite. Ahem, ahem. My dad coughed to stop the whispering in the room. Then said with profound sincerity, despite his physical challenges and having only his grandfather as family, Harry has persevered all the way to senior year, a remarkable demonstration of tenacity in his studies that deserves everyone's admiration. Is there anyone willing to step forward to help him complete the college entrance exams? The room remained silent, watching his mouth open and close. I couldn't help but think of a fish on the chopping block, waiting to be killed. After a moment of daze, I suddenly snapped back to reality. I've actually been reborn. I've gone back to the day my dad told me to help that little cripple. Remembering what my dad did in my past life, a shiver ran down my spine, and my body started trembling uncontrollably. Zoe, are you okay? Someone gently poked me in the back, their voice sweet, but a chill ran down my spine. It was Gloria, my dear sister. I didn't realize she was also my father's daughter until I was on my deathbed. Before marrying my mother, my father had been involved with another woman, who became pregnant with her during that time. She was given her mother's surname at birth. She was an excellent student, always coming in second to me, the perpetual runner-up in our class. In my previous life, she conspired with my father to frame me, bribing Harry to spread rumors about my poor character and even posting a video online that made it look like I was throwing myself at him. Just because her grades weren't as good as mine, she couldn't stand living in my shadow and wanted to ruin me. Ahem, ahem. My dad cleared his throat again and gave me a meaningful look. Harry's English grades are poor. Zoe, as the English class representative, you should commute to and from school with him from now on. Use that time to speak English and help improve his listening skills. Sure enough, since I didn't volunteer, he still found a way to push Harry onto me when I didn't respond. Gloria muttered a few words behind my back. Who'd want to take on such a heavy burden? But if we want to improve his English, Zoe, you're the only one who can help. So that's what this is about. They just want me to take this problem off their hands. I paid no attention, just sneered to myself. Time seemed to freeze at that moment. The classroom was dead silent, yet I could feel the tension in the air. My father's seemingly calm face was shadowed by a gathering storm, as if thunder and lightning could erupt at any moment. But now, I wasn't the least bit afraid. I slowly rose to my feet and turned to look at Harry. He's already 18, and he's a guy. I'm a girl. It wouldn't be appropriate. Harry's eyes visibly dimmed, and he buried his head in his chest. Ridiculous. What's this nonsense about boys and girls being inconvenient? How old are you anyway? You're just high school students. focus on your studies and help each other out. After all these years of education, you still haven't raised your level of thinking. My dad raised his voice and started ranting at me, just because I'm his daughter. He felt completely justified and entitled to say those things, but I'm not the same Zoe from my past life anymore. He can't intimidate me anymore. There's actually another reason behind his intense reaction. He has an account on Douyin with over 1 million followers, called the most beautiful homeroom teacher. The shop window only sold books, and he claimed all proceeds would be donated to Hope primary schools in impoverished Western mountain regions, but in reality, he only donated a small portion, while the majority was used to support Gloria and her daughter, and I was actually the main reason this account went viral, because he edited some classroom surveillance footage and posted it on the account. The content essentially highlighted his impartiality. He selflessly awarded honors to other students, even when they were less accomplished than me, and most of those other students were Gloria, his other daughter. Fueled by the online buzz, he instantly went viral. My recent action undoubtedly cost him a potential piece of content to fuel the trending discussion. Ugh, what a hypocritical facade. To my surprise, Harry stood up at that moment and started hobbling toward me, dragging his lame leg. Zoe, my leg is disabled. With my condition, what outrageous thing could I possibly do? I genuinely want to improve my English grades too. Could we commute to and from school together? I'm begging you. Harry looked at me, pleading in a low voice like a pitiful puppy. No, I stared at him coldly. Because I hate you. Harry froze, his gaze turning strange as he looked at me. My father's expression grew increasingly complicated. Just then, Gloria, who was sitting behind me, finally couldn't stay seated any longer. Zoe, is there some misunderstanding between you two? The things you just said don't sound like you at all. You've always been such a warm and kind person. I glanced at Gloria and sneered. I've always been kind and caring. Then how come you got the Municipal Merit Student Award instead of me, and the Outstanding Class Leader title? Why did you get that too? While I got nothing, Gloria's face instantly flushed crimson, her jaw going slack with disbelief. She clearly hadn't expected me to confront her so directly, leaving her momentarily speechless. I pressed on. If you're so capable, why haven't you stepped up to help Harry? Or are you just paying lip service while secretly seeing him as dead weight? I emphasized the word burden heavily, and Harry beside me hung his head again. I stared at him expressionlessly, taken aback by my words. Gloria froze for a moment before flusteredly saying, I never thought that way. You're being way too harsh, Harry. I'll walk to and from school with you from now on. Finally, under my relentless pressure, Gloria gave in. Before I could even settle in, Gloria confronted me again. I can take Harry to and from school, but my English really isn't as good as yours. Since Harry is so eager to improve his English scores, you should help him out too. I paused for a moment, thought it over, and said hesitantly, it's not that I can't, but our seats are quite far apart, which makes it a bit inconvenient. Gloria smiled. No problem, you can always switch seats. How about you swap places with Harry? You're a good half head taller than him, I interjected flatly, looking straight at her. Hearing this, Gloria's eyes widened as she stared at me like I was a complete stranger. In my previous life, Gloria had talked me into moving to the back row to sit with Harry. I ended up constantly distracted by the troublemakers behind us, and my grades plummeted, dethroning me from the top. Too, given a second chance at life, I certainly wasn't going to let her have her way. My comment made the surrounding classmates realize how out of place Gloria looked sitting up front, as if she'd pulled strings to get that seat. Their gazes toward her turned noticeably unfriendly. My father stood at the lectern with a darkened expression, grinding his teeth in frustration. Yet he couldn't bring himself to say anything. Gloria bit her lower lip, eyes reddening as if she were on the verge of bursting into tears any second. I teased, what's wrong, honor student, feeling like you don't belong in the back, thinking only underachievers sit there. The gazes of the students behind her pierced through her in unison. Gloria shrank back and quickly said, what are you talking about? Fine, I'll switch seats. It's no big deal. Ha, checkmate. My dad was livid. But with things having gone this far, he couldn't very well backtrack. He could only watch helplessly as his precious daughter made her way to the back row. Harry hobbled over behind me, his arms laden with a thick stack of books. Gotta hand it to the gimp. He's got a sense of responsibility. Took Gloria's favor and actually followed through for her. During self-study period, he kept pestering me with English questions. as if afraid I might actually have time to study. These were the exact words Gloria whispered to me at my deathbed in my previous life. I half-heartedly answered a few questions before putting my foot down. Listen, Harry, I did agree to help you, but you can't monopolize all my time. I'm a student too, and I need to study as well. Besides, constantly asking questions like this is disrupting everyone else's studying. My desk mate glanced back at Harry and said, exactly. Like a fly buzzing non-stop. Listen, Gimpy. With your grades nearly at the bottom, do you really need to bother Zoe with questions? How selfish. Can't improve your own scores and now trying to drag down our class's top student destined for Tsinghua or Peking University. Now that you mention it, that does sound rather sinister. Before I even had a chance to really get going, my classmates started chiming in one after another. Harry shut his mouth indignantly. In my past life, Harry played no small part in my grades plummeting so drastically. Back then, he kept asking questions just like today. I thought he had finally realized the importance of studying and making progress. Not wanting to dampen his enthusiasm, I sacrificed my own study time and taught him with all my heart. Little did I know, he only meant to harm me. Ding, the jarring school bell snapped me back to reality. After school, I saw Gloria reluctantly following Harry out of the school gate. But she hadn't gone far before she ditched Harry, walking away briskly as if avoiding the plague, picking up her pace with every step. As I passed by Harry, he suddenly called out to me, "Thank you, Zoe. I know you still care about me." Care about him. I took a wary step back, looking at him with disgust. You think I care about you, of course. You must have been worried about me. That's why you followed along. Hearing such shameless words made me sick to my stomach. I snapped. Stop flattering yourself. I've told you before. I despise you. I truly do. The sight of you disgusts me, not because of your disability or your appearance, but because your soul is rotten. Stay away from me. Do I make myself clear this time? Harry stood frozen in place, staring at me in stunned silence. He seemed to be wondering why I, who had always been so tolerant of others, would detest him so intensely. After leaving the little cripple far behind, I quickened my pace home. Eager to see my mother, she was the one who loved me most in this world. In our previous life, she was pushed off the balcony by Harry's deranged grandfather and died a tragic death alongside me. In this life, I won't let the tragedy repeat itself. I will protect my mother. The moment I stepped inside, I rushed into the kitchen, threw myself into my mother's arms, and sobbed while holding her tight. Mom, I'm so sorry. I've missed you so much. Mom, this time I won't let anything happen to you. My mother gently stroked my head, but I'm perfectly fine. Zoe, what's gotten into you? Did something happen? I wiped my tears and tried to steady my voice. Mom, Dad has been lying to you. He's been lying to both of us. When he doesn't come home at night, he's not taking care of Grandma at her place at all. He's been going to Joda community. Before I could finish, Mom staggered and nearly collapsed. I quickly steadied her and guided her to the living room sofa. When she had calmed down, I continued. He went into the building with my classmate Gloria and her mother. People in the neighborhood say the three of them have lived there for years, and they say he's Gloria's father. My eyes welled up again, tears spilling out despite my efforts to hold them back. Yet Mom remained calm, gently wiping away my tears, seeing her face gradually grow serene, as if she had already sensed it, and I had merely confirmed her suspicions. This was something Gloria told me right before I died in my previous life. Killing me wasn't enough for her. She wanted me to die in agony, consumed by hatred. Little did she know, I've returned with memories of my past life intact, drying my tears. I hugged my mother and whispered, "We're done with this guy, we want." In the days that followed, Harry became much more subdued, only occasionally asking me a few simple questions. It seemed like a performance put on for those watching. After accepting favors, you've got to at least make a show of it to save face. Soon enough, the first monthly exam after my rebirth arrived. I got first place again. Zoe, you're number one again. I heard you were top of your class in middle school, but I never expected you to maintain that streak in high school. That's seriously impressive, absolutely remarkable. At this rate, you're definitely getting into Tsinghua or Peking University. My respect, consistently brilliant and steady. Are you the reincarnation of the god of literature or something? Oh, come on, you're just teasing me. I replied with a laugh to my classmates' compliments. In my previous life, after I moved to the back of the classroom, I was constantly distracted by the underachievers and spent a huge chunk of my time tutoring Harry. As a result, my exam scores kept slipping until I fell out of the top 10. This time around, it was Gloria who ended up sitting in the back. As expected, her grades started to decline, dropping from second place to seventh. Well, that's what you call outsmarting yourself. Instead of dragging me down, you ended up falling first. That made her so angry she turned pale. On my way home from school, I saw Gloria leading Harry into a small alley. Harry, here's some for now. You must find a way to bring her grades down. I'm sick of her always being ahead of me. I've really had enough. Once the job's done, I'll throw in extra cash. This should keep you going for a long while. Could even buy your granddad's medicine. How much extra? This much. I stood listening at the alleyway corner, my expression darkening by the second. The sky grew dark. Dark clouds loomed overhead. I knew a storm was brewing. The next day, Harry was like a changed man, eagerly seeking my advice. He kept quizzing me non-stop. From closed tests to reading comprehension, he wouldn't even let me be during breaks, dragging me into speaking and listening drills, but he could barely understand a word or string a sentence together. He was just wasting my time. Then my dad came over and laid into me, demanding to know why my tutoring was making Harry's English grades worse instead of better. He couldn't even score 60 points anymore, and Dad told me to get his grades up, pronto. If I weren't his daughter, would he dare make such an unreasonable demand of me? Very well, but has he ever treated me like a daughter? In his heart, Gloria is his only real daughter. Still, I swallowed my anger and pretended to comply. I heaved a sigh of relief. Pride comes before a fall. 3. Harry, ever the opportunist, thought I was genuinely intimidated and became even bolder, shamelessly. He handed me the entire English exam paper and demanded I explain it all. Halfway through the explanation, I pretended to lose steam and showed weakness for the first time. Please, stop making me explain. I'm about to be sick of talking. What do I have to do for you to let me go? Harry paused for a moment. Then after a few seconds of thought, a sly grin spread across his face. How about you accompany me to and from school from now on? Gloria is irresponsible. She often ditches me halfway. Well, I hesitated briefly before agreeing. All right then, I knew exactly what kind of mischief he was plotting. In my past life, while walking him home, he suddenly shoved a 100 yuan bill into my hand, saying it was to thank me for looking after him, knowing his family was dirt poor. How could I accept his money? I stepped forward to return it, but he kept pushing me away. Such a heartwarming scene. It felt like a story of gratitude and reciprocation, but soon after, Harry started spreading rumors everywhere that I had a crush on him, that I was harassing him, begging me to leave him alone. Soon after, that misleading video was uploaded online. That's when I realized Harry had set me up, but I couldn't figure out for the life of me why he'd want to harm me. It wasn't until I was falling from the building, right before blacking out, that Gloria gave me the answer. Here he goes again. But this time, I'm afraid I'll let him down. I took off my black-framed glasses and put in contact lenses, applied light makeup while looking in the mirror. I pulled out the hair tie from my ponytail, letting my raven black hair cascade down naturally, youthful, radiant, and full of vitality. When I approached Harry, he was taken aback at first, then his lecherous gaze remained glued to me. Along the way, I deliberately kept my distance from him. Though I stole glances at him from time to time, our eyes met. And I gazed at him with tender affection. He was flustered, the chemistry between us was heating up. I knew the moment had come. Harry, I actually like you. Fighting back nausea, I forced out the words against my will. Harry stared at me in surprise for a moment. Then without hesitation, he limped toward me with a lecherous grin. He grabbed me and tried to kiss me. After struggling back and forth, I shoved him hard to the ground, wiped my tears, and ran away. That very night, a video of Harry attempting to assault me was posted online. That night, I slept soundly in my mother's arms. The next day, the video went viral. Not bad. The school had to take the matter seriously. In the school office, I met Harry's grandfather. He rushed over in a hurry, hunched over in a shabby gray down jacket stained with grease, for he lifted his long, deeply wrinkled face, fixing me with an intense stare from his murky, narrow eyes. At first, I flinched, but as I looked at him, my fear slowly turned into hatred. In my past life, it was this withered old man who pushed my mother and me off the balcony. Teachers, you must stand up for my Harry and see that justice is done. Harry told me that little tramp deliberately seduced him to set him up. You can't let that video blind you to the truth. That little hussy is pure evil, a real troublemaker. Asterisk ahem asterisk. My father cleared his throat awkwardly. Mind your language. I knew he was just afraid that his lack of reaction would seem odd. After all, I am his daughter, at least in name. What nonsense are you spouting, you old fool? If you dare spread lies about my daughter again, I'll tear your mouth to shreds. My mother shielded me, her chest heaving with anger. Humph, don't act like your daughter's some saint. If she wasn't interested in Harry, why would she shamelessly insist on walking him home? She's clearly had a crush on my Harry for ages. My mother pointed a trembling finger at his grandfather. That's enough. This really isn't such a big deal. You've been classmates for years. Let's not blow this out of proportion. My father adjusted his glasses and continued. Zoe, make a video explaining it was all a misunderstanding. Let's get this under control first. I stared at my father in disbelief. That wasn't what he'd said in my previous life, back then. He forced me to drop out and apologize to Harry in front of the whole class. I thought I was prepared, but my heart still clenched with a sharp pang of pain. Ken, that's bullshit. Your own daughter got bullied and you're sitting here playing peacemaker instead of giving a damn. My mother glared at them icily. I've already called the police. Harry's head snapped up, and for the first time I saw genuine panic in his eyes, before his grandfather could even start his tantrum. The police arrived on the scene. As the police led Harry away, he glanced back at me. It felt like a sharp blade piercing right through me. Harry had just turned 18 a few days prior, while I still had 6 months to go before my 18th birthday. This practically amounted to an adult taking advantage of a minor. I heard the charges are quite serious. Still no telling how long he'll be locked up. After he left, Gloria slipped back into position behind me. She took the initiative to patch things up with me. Resuming her role as my dear friend and confidant, I couldn't be bothered to expose her charade. Let her put on her theatrical performance. I'll just enjoy the show. But our fake friendship finally fell apart after the second monthly exam results were posted. I still came in first, while she moved back up to second place from 7th, yet the score gap between us actually widened, from 30 points to 60. The class was buzzing with gossip again. Zoe, you're absolutely killing it. Beating the second place by over 60 points. Are you the actual god of exams in human form? This is like bringing a gun to a knife fight. Have some mercy. How is second place supposed to feel about this? Oh mighty exam deity, please accept our worship and bless our grades too. Even Gloria, skilled as she was at maintaining appearances, couldn't keep up her facade after hearing her classmates' comments. Her face was longer than a donkey's, glaring at me as if I were her mortal enemy. Seeing his precious daughter so upset, my dad, Gloria's dad, Ken, started stirring up trouble too. That very night, he posted a video on the Most Beautiful Homeroom Teacher account. He openly claimed that although his daughter got good grades, she was just a bookworm, but the truly impressive one is the student who came in second, even though their score was 60 points lower than the top students. They're accomplished in piano, painting, dance, and Go, a truly well-rounded student, finally. They made sure to encourage all students to become well-rounded learners in this new era. He used the money I earned to pamper his precious daughter, and now he has the nerve to imply I'm just a bookworm. Fine then, I'll study like my life depends on it and ace every exam. This is the only weapon I have left, and I'm not letting go of it. I'll strike at their hearts, one precise thrust at a time. I closed the video, pulled out my test papers, and buried myself in solving problems. Already getting restless. This is only the beginning. Ken's online trolling wasn't enough. Now he's taking things way too far. He constantly finds excuses to reprimand me and keeps sending me home for self-reflection over every little thing. He thought this would slow down my study progress. But he was wrong. I actually study more efficiently and make better progress at home. I guess I should thank him. Thanks to his special attention, I scored 709 points in the final mock exam and ranked second in the citywide joint examination. Ken and Gloria were completely dumbfounded, but they quickly changed their approach. If force didn't work, they'd try persuasion. One night 2 weeks before the college entrance exams, Ken didn't go to Grandma's house. He came home instead and made a point of stopping by my room. Zoe, would you consider skipping this year's college entrance exam? You're an excellent student. If you take it next year instead, you'll still get outstanding scores. My head snapped up as I stared at him in disbelief. Why on earth should I give it up? He sighed and continued, you've been putting a lot of academic pressure on Gloria. Her mental state has really deteriorated, and I'm worried. Her family is afraid she might do something drastic. 5. That's why they came to me. Zoe, you're a sensible and kind-hearted girl. Just think about it. I cut him off directly. I may be kind, but I'm not stupid. Her poor decisions are her own doing. I'm not to blame. She just lacks the ability to learn and the mental fortitude, and she's psychologically twisted. Why can't she just focus on being her best self? Why does everything have to be a competition? Right, right, right. Ken softened his tone. You're absolutely correct, and honestly, I know that too, but her family is willing to compensate you with 200,000. Isn't your mother supposed to have heart surgery? Maybe you should think it over. His words made me laugh in disbelief. As my laughter faded, my eyes began to sting. So he knew my mother needed surgery and money. Then why didn't he use some of the earnings from that account to help with her medical expenses? What a hypocrite. My eyes turned cold. Teacher, have you forgotten? I'm also your student. How could you propose such an underhanded deal with me? Where is your professional ethics? Do you even deserve to be called an educator? Ken's face stiffened, then twisted into a vicious snarl as he shouted at me, who are you to judge whether I'm fit to be a teacher? But I have plenty of ways to prevent you from taking the college entrance exams. Is he threatening me? Does he still think my mother is some weak, submissive middle-aged woman? Does he still believe I'm that gentle, introverted girl who only reflects inwardly when faced with injustice? Too bad for him. I'm not the same girl from my past life anymore. At the college entrance exam rally, I took the stage as the student representative to deliver a speech. I turned on the voice recorder and held it up to the microphone. Zoe, would you consider withdrawing from this year's college entrance exam? Why would I ever give up? You've put Gloria under immense academic pressure. Her mental state has completely deteriorated, and I'm worried. Her family fears she might do something drastic. That's why they came to me. Zoe, you're such a sensible and kind-hearted girl. Perhaps you could. Gloria's family is willing to compensate you with 200,000 yuan. Isn't your mother scheduled for heart surgery? Maybe you should think it over. Teacher, have you forgotten? I'm also your student. How could you propose such a deal in private? Where's your professional ethics? Do you even deserve to be called an educator? Who are you to judge whether I'm fit to be a teacher? But I have plenty of ways to stop you from taking the college entrance exam. Ken's face contorted as he staggered onto the stage and lunged at me. You little bitch. How dare you set me up? I'll kill you. Stop him. The principal pointed at Ken and roared. Our school finally produced a student with potential for Tsinghua or Peking University, and you're making her give up the college entrance exam. I think you've had enough of this job. Principal, it's not what you think. I was just discussing with her about retaking the exam next year. Ken's face turned pale. Besides, I'm her father. This is a family matter. The audience erupted in boos and jeers. He was quickly escorted out by security. After that incident, his reputation was completely ruined. Moreover, he did indeed violate relevant regulations, and the impact was quite severe. He was fired that very day. Shortly after, a video of Ken with Gloria and her mother was also posted online. It didn't take long for the resourceful netizens to uncover more details. Piece by piece, the full story came together. When the truth came to light, the family of three became the target of public condemnation. The most beautiful homeroom teacher account was bombarded with relentless criticism from netizens. The most admirable homeroom teacher, what a joke. She's the most hypocritical and disgusting teacher I've ever seen, bar none. Damn, all that talk about donating the book sale profits to Hope Elementary. Turns out that shameless mother-daughter duo pocketed everything. What a sneaky scheme. I'm absolutely furious. My heart breaks for Zoe and her mom. Being stuck with such a worthless man as a husband and father, they've had the worst luck imaginable. 6. I'm reporting his account for fraud and scamming people out of their money. Report this, report this. An hour later, his account got suspended. My mother held me tight, tears streaming down her face. In this lifetime, Mom showed incredible courage. She picked up her camera and refused to let herself be mistreated any longer. A few days later, the college entrance exams arrived right on schedule. After finishing the exam, I walked out of the test center feeling completely weightless. Every bit of effort I'd put in paid off. This was hands down my best performance ever. Tsinghua and Peking University. This time it's in the bag. On the way home, my desk mate told me that Gloria was too overwhelmed to take the exam. who's to blame for that? The next day, I went with my mom to file for divorce at the courthouse. After all the twists and turns, they ended up getting divorced, since Ken had been misusing the marital assets for other purposes over a long period, violating mom's legitimate rights. The court awarded the majority of the property to her. Their spacious apartment in Jueda community was also auctioned off. That day, I happened to see them moving out of the neighborhood. The three of them were covered in dust and utterly dejected. Their pride, once wrapped in material possessions, now lay shattered on the ground. Midsummer. I received the admission letter from Peking University. Mom was beaming from ear to ear as she prepared a seafood feast in our new home to celebrate my achievement. Laughter filled our day from dawn till dusk. After cutting ties with that toxic person, our lives kept getting better. At the end of August, I embarked on my college journey alone. My mother had just had surgery and needed to rest in bed. I insisted on staying to take care of her, but she wouldn't hear of it. So I hired a caregiver to look after her in my place. My mother received a substantial amount of money in the divorce settlement. After I got into Peking University, I also received around 200,000 yuan in awards from the education department and some companies, so my finances became much more comfortable. Just as I thought, I participated in a half-month military training at school. Then, my college life officially began. Bright classrooms, the nation's most outstanding teachers, and classmates who were all top scorers from their respective provinces and cities. I felt like I was living in a dream. I cherished my hard-won college life, making each day fulfilling by joining student clubs, participating in various competitions, and studying in the library. On weekends, I also took taekwondo and sanda classes off campus, finally learning all the things I'd wanted to as a child but couldn't afford. I only occasionally heard about Gloria and Ken from my high school deskmate, but I had long since moved on, listening to their stories like they were anecdotes about strangers. Gloria not only missed the college entrance exam that year, but also couldn't take it in the following years, because she had suffered a mental breakdown. She went from being the apple of her parents' eye to a despised illegitimate child. The sheer magnitude of the fall was more than she could bear. Then again, she couldn't even handle the fact that my grades were better than hers, even when she was the runner-up, let alone such a massive life-altering blow. Not only had she lost the ability to learn, but she also began engaging in self-harm and violent behavior toward her parents. She kept crying out that she never should have been born, wondering why she had to come into this world just to be overshadowed by me. Through gritted teeth, she said she hated her parents. If it weren't for them, she wouldn't have been brought into this world to suffer such humiliation. Just as I graduated from Peking University, became a renowned screenwriter, and started trending frequently online. 7. Gloria completely lost her mind. She grabbed a kitchen knife, killed her own mother, and left Ken with severe injuries. While Gloria was being forcibly admitted to a psychiatric hospital, Ken was rushed into the emergency room. The hospital had already issued a critical condition notice, but I spent a fortune to bring in the country's top doctors and managed to pull him back from the brink. He's paralyzed from the waist down, his speech is slurred, and he'll be bedridden for the rest of his life. This was the best outcome the doctors had prepared me for from the start. I want him confined to that bed for whatever life he has left, suffering every day, filled with remorse every day, until he draws his last breath. I'm quite content with this living hell. This is what he owes me and Mom. In our past life, he showed no hesitation when he caused Mom and me to die tragically. By the time I left the hospital, night had fallen. Parking at the hospital was tight, so I left my car in an outside lot and walked about 6 or 7 minutes. As I was passing through a quiet, deserted alley, suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me, about 10 meters away. They sounded different from normal footsteps, and oddly familiar. I was sure of it. The man was lame. I crouched down pretending to tie my shoelaces, then stood up and quickened my pace, but the person behind me lunged at me like a wild beast. In no time, we were tangled up together. He yanked off my jacket and tore the buttons from my shirt. A sinister voice, like a venomous snake, slithered into my ear. Zoe, this time you can't escape. I'm going to ruin you. Then you'll be dragged into the mud, just like me. Then we can finally be together. In my dazed state, the grotesque face seemed to shift, one moment resembling Ken, the next Gloria, as if 3 faces had merged into one. He's got a strong grip now, like he's been working out in prison. He forced my head down, but just as he was about to kiss me, I kicked him to the ground. He watched me slowly get up, then pulled out a knife with a creepy grin. I screamed and ran back to where I'd been crouching, grabbed my phone that was still recording, and bolted out of the alley toward the light. Hopefully this time, they'll be locked up for life. The end. In order to make a living, my wife and I opened a pork shop. It's a sweltering hot day, and strangely enough, all our regular customers are scrambling to buy cured bacon, while the fresh meat is completely ignored. This really is quite an unusual situation. 01. I run a pork shop in the local area, and it's a husband and wife business. The most sought-after items in our small shop aren't the fresh meats, but rather the old hams and cured bacon. Every year, when the autumn and winter seasons arrive and the northwest wind starts to blow, I begin to marinate a large quantity of cured bacon. To be honest, the taste of our cured bacon is truly exceptional, and it just gets more fragrant the longer it's stored. But this year is really strange. Usually, in summer, not many people buy cured bacon, yet this time it's selling like hotcakes. It's really quite baffling. And it's hard to make sense of this situation. Blaze, this regular customer of ours, actually wanted to buy up all the cured bacon in my stock, but I told him that there wasn't much left in stock. He insisted, asking me to make some for him even in summer, and he wanted a rather large quantity. Of course, I refused. Cured bacon made in summer just doesn't have the right taste. It's not as good, and we can't do anything to ruin our reputation. I thought that would be the end of it. But who would have thought that Blaze came back the next day? He immediately demanded 500 gin of cured bacon. I told him that it couldn't be made in this season because the taste would be too poor. He stubbornly insisted on buying it, saying that his old father really liked this, and even if the taste was a bit off, it was still much better than that from other shops. I couldn't help but tease him. You shouldn't eat too much of it even if it's delicious. Experts have said that eating too much cured bacon can easily cause cancer. Blaze sneered disdainfully. Can you really believe those so-called experts? There's not a single word of truth coming out of their mouths. I smiled and turned down the air conditioning a few more degrees. You're right, this summer is so hot and humid, and those experts still say it's normal. They're just talking nonsense. Blaze nodded. The weather this year is indeed abnormal. We have to be more careful ourselves. How long will it take to make the cured bacon? About 14 days. Okay, that'll work. Also, prepare 200 gin of lard for me. Blaze, what on earth are you going to do with all this? Can your family really consume so much? My old father loves it, so there's nothing I can do. All right, I'll deliver it to you along with the cured bacon when it's ready. All these regular customers are buying in incredibly large quantities, starting with enough to last a whole year at a time. The sales of fresh meat are still normal, but I just feel that something isn't quite right. 02. I have an old house in the mountains on the outskirts. The yard is really big, covering an area of 3 mu, and there's also a large cave. I make all these meat products in that cave. When I took the orders, I was overjoyed, thinking that I could make a lot of money this time. But when I started making them, I almost exhausted myself. The cave and the yard were filled with things. The quantity was almost the same as what I've made in the past few years combined. When I delivered the goods to Blaze's house, I was actually stopped by the doorman. Blaze lives in that villa area with more than 90 single-family villas. The people living there are all prominent figures in our area. Normally, someone like me, a familiar face, could enter freely, but today the doorman, Beckett, just wouldn't let me in. He insisted that the owner had to come out and pick up the goods in person. I got a bit angry and shouted at Beckett, "Beckett, you've grown a temper in just a few days, haven't you? You're even stopping me." Beckett said seriously, "Griffin, this is a new rule set by the property owners committee. Don't make things difficult for me. Just call the owner quickly." There was nothing I could do, so I had to give Blaze a call. Soon enough, Blaze came out smiling and apologized to me. "Griffin, I'm really sorry. The property owners committee has a new rule that doesn't allow non-residents to enter. Please help me move the goods to my car." Like this, I made calls to several other customers one after another, and they all came out to pick up the goods in their cars personally. During this time, I also saw a large amount of daily necessities like rice, flour, and cooking oil being transported outside the community. Moreover, I noticed that the walls of the community had been heightened and reinforced, and there was even an electric fence installed. This really seems rather strange no matter how you look at it. After delivering the goods, I was so sore and tired that my back and legs ached. In the evening, when I talked about this with my wife, she also thought it was strange and said that there were many people who wanted to buy cured bacon today, but But she didn't accept their orders. It's really exhausting. Later, I mentioned that our cured bacon and lard won't go bad even if they're stored for several years, especially that old cured bacon. The longer it's stored, the more flavorful it becomes. Could it be that something really is going to happen? My wife comforted me not to think too much. We've been so tired these days, so we should go to bed early. As long as my child and I are by her side, she's not afraid even if the sky were to fall. She then said, "Honey, we've earned a lot these days. Let's replace the doors and windows of our building. It always lets in the wind in winter, and the child always complains about being cold. Since it's hot now, let's replace them with new ones and seal them properly." "Sure, my wife, I'll go and take a look tomorrow morning. Let's not make cured bacon for a few days. It's tiring and hot, and the taste of the bacon made now won't be as good. We can't ruin our reputation." 03. The next day, I went to the building materials market, and it felt a bit deserted. I found Luca, who is in the decoration business. Speaking of Luca, he's from the same village as me, and we get along really well. His family is from a big household, which is quite different from our small family. There are more than 100 households in the village, and I've always been quite low-key. As soon as I entered his shop, I directly threw a pack of Jean Yulon cigarettes on the table. Luca picked up the cigarettes, smiled, and said, "You're always so polite. Come on, have a taste of my tea, brother." I walked over and sat down, took a sip of the tea, and then asked, "Luca, why does it seem like there aren't many people here?" Luca sighed. "Everyone has been sent out. It's really strange. Actually, I've been so busy these days that I haven't had a moment's rest. There's still a great demand these days. But we can't get the goods in this small place now, and we can't take on new jobs, so it looks like there are fewer people around." I comforted him. "It's good to be busy. After all, there's money to be made. We work hard just to have a cozy life with our wives, children, and a warm bed, right?" "What kind of jobs have been keeping you so busy?" Luca said. "I really can't understand what those rich people are thinking. Their houses are perfectly fine, but they insist on adding insulation layers. Recently, the building materials market around here has run out of stock, and we can't even order materials from the manufacturers. I thought it was a bit strange. Is the demand really that high? Didn't you ask the owners what was going on?" Luca shrugged. "Who knows? They just said that their houses were cold and drafty last winter. Some people even added an extra layer to their windows and wanted to seal them properly." I frowned. "Luca, don't you think this is a bit strange?" Luca waved his hand. "What's so strange about it? Those rich people have too much money and don't know what to do with it. They can spend it however they like. By the way, what did you come to see me for?" That's when I remembered the main thing. "Well, my building also lets in the cold wind in winter. I was thinking about adding some insulation materials and replacing the doors and windows or something. For your building, don't worry. I'll send someone to take a look at your place later," Luca said as he picked up the cigarette on the table, lit it, and took a deep puff. "But Luca, didn't you just say that the building materials are out of stock now?" I asked, feeling a bit puzzled. Luca exhaled a puff of smoke and smiled. "Brother, those rich people are asking for high-grade materials that can withstand extremely low temperatures of -60 to 70 degrees Celsius. Even the doors and windows are made of special materials that are explosion-proof and resistant to low temperatures. What do we ordinary folks need such luxurious things for?" "Luca, the lowest temperature here in previous years was only -20 degrees Celsius. Why would they need materials that can withstand such low temperatures?" I furrowed my brow. Luca waved his hand and said casually, "What's so strange about it? Maybe those rich people think this place is like the Antarctic, -70 degrees Celsius. It's all because they have too much money to burn. I'll send someone to contact you later and go to your place to take a look in person, then we can figure out the most cost-effective way to do it according to the actual situation." "Okay, Luca, then I'll be waiting for your call." I nodded and left Luca's shop with a bit of doubt in my heart. I always feel that something is going to happen. 04. I decided to check out several local high-end villa areas. Along the way, I noticed that the walls of many villa areas were being reinforced. Some of the reinforcement work had already been completed, making the walls look extremely sturdy. Outside each community, logistics vehicles were shuttling back and forth busily, constantly unloading and loading goods. This bustling scene made the doubts in my heart even stronger. When I drove past a particularly high-end villa area, I found a lot of black cinders scattered on the road. Out of curiosity, I stopped the car and walked closer to take a look. to my surprise. They were actually coal cinders. Nowadays, even in rural areas, burning coal is gradually being phased out, so why would these high-end villa areas buy a large amount of coal? Looking at the coal cinders scattered on the road, I guessed that the amount of coal they bought must be quite substantial. This discovery made me even more confused. At the same time, it made me realize that the residents of these high-end villa areas seemed to be preparing for something that was about to happen. With a heart full of doubts, I received a call from my wife. Griffin, my elder sister is back from the capital. Bring a few dishes back tonight. Wasn't our elder sister working as a nanny in the capital? It's not a holiday now. Why did she come back? I asked, feeling puzzled. Who knows? She said that the owner's family is going to renovate the house and let her come back to rest for a while in advance. They even gave her 3 months' salary in advance and told her to go back after the house renovation is finished. My wife explained. In the evening, when I saw my elder sister, I asked her curiously, "Elder sister, your employer is really nice to give you a few months paid leave." "That's right, the owner's family is really good. They gave me 3 months pay. Some employers only give 1 month's pay, or even no pay at all," my elder sister replied, hearing my elder sister's description. The doubts in my heart grew deeper. What's going on? Could it be that all the nannies in your area were asked to come back? More or less, anyway, quite a few people were given a vacation. They said they were going to carry out renovation on the old residential areas, which would take a few months, my elder sister explained. I felt that things were not that simple, so I continued to ask, are the villa areas also going to have the old residential area renovation? Who knows, anyway. It has nothing to do with me. I get paid and don't have to work. That's great. My elder sister didn't seem to care about the reason. Seeing that my elder sister didn't want to talk more about it, I didn't press further. I could only echo, "That's true. You haven't seen your husband and child for a long time, have you? I'll send you home tomorrow." That night, lying in bed, I tossed and turned, always feeling that something was going to happen. These rich people are acting so strangely in every way. 05. In the dead of night, a sudden shattering sound of glass pierced through the stillness, jolting me awake from my sleep. The air was filled with a bone-chilling cold that made one's hair stand on end. I looked around and was horrified to find my wife standing there motionless, holding our child in her arms. Their bodies seemed to have become stiff, and no matter how much I called out to them, there was not the slightest response. I trembled as I walked towards them, my heart filled with overwhelming fear and despair. I reached out my hand and gently touched my wife's cheek. All I felt was an icy coldness seeping through my fingertips. Suddenly, her body cracked under my touch, as if the fragile ice layer had been shattered. Then her entire body began to break apart, turning into countless ice crystals that scattered to the ground. The sight in front of me made me scream in horror. I stumbled backward and fell to the ground. I struggled to get up, only to find that my hands were tightly stuck to the floor. I tried my best to pull them away, but the floor seemed to have stuck to my hands, making it impossible for me to move. I was horrified to find that I was being swallowed up by the floor, and I was being frozen into ice along with its coldness. My hands gradually lost their sensation, becoming stiff and cold. I fought with all my might to break free, but the coldness of the floor became more and more intense, as if it were going to swallow me whole. I screamed in terror, but my voice was swallowed up by the icy air and couldn't be heard. Just then, a series of urgent calls pulled me back to reality. I suddenly opened my eyes and found myself lying in bed, my clothes soaked in sweat. It turned out to be just a dream. I got up and sat by the bedside, still filled with lingering fear. "Did you have a nightmare?" my wife asked worriedly. I comforted my wife and then went to the balcony alone to smoke. I still couldn't calm down from the fear and despair I had just experienced. I had no more. The next day, after sending my elder sister off, I returned to the pork shop, took stock of the inventory, closed the shop, and then took my wife back to our old house. 06. The journey to the old house wasn't very far. Just a few dozen kilometers. I was still haunted by the nightmare from last night, but I didn't dare to tell my wife about it for fear that she would worry. On the way, my wife noticed that I didn't look right and asked with concern, "Griffin, is there something wrong back at our hometown?" "No, I suspect that there might be extreme weather this year. Let's go back and take stock of things and make some preparations," I said. My wife didn't seem to care at all and said, "Extreme weather? You must be tired. Stop imagining things. Everything is fine, isn't it, wife?" "I'm really okay. I'm just a bit worried. Why did all those regular customers come to buy so much old cured bacon and lard this year? My wife couldn't help but laugh. Griffin, stop imagining things. Our cured bacon is delicious, and the lard is fragrant too. They probably want to stock up more, these days. There aren't many delicious things to be found. I frowned, still feeling uneasy, and said, Wife, don't you think it's strange that these regular customers suddenly bought so much cured bacon and lard all at once? But no matter what, they shouldn't be buying hundreds of gin at a time. We've been doing this business every year, and those regular customers usually only buy a few dozen gin at a time. This time, the amount they bought is 10 times more than usual. There must be something going on here. I paused and then continued. And there's also the matter of our elder sister coming back from the capital. Don't you think it's strange? She's working as a nanny in a high-end villa area. Now she says that the whole community is going to have an old residential area renovation and they sent all the nannies home. I just don't believe it. Even if there really is going to be a renovation, don't the old people and children at home need someone to take care of them? I guess they sent the nannies home because they're afraid that some information might leak out. My wife looked confused and said, Stop imagining things. To store it for a long time, then why don't they just buy fresh pork and freeze it and eat it slowly? I smiled and replied, Wife, have we ever eaten that kind of pork that has been frozen for a long time? That kind of meat loses its taste and nutrition after being frozen for a long time. It tastes like zombie meat and no one would like it. I always feel that there might be some problems with food in the future. We still have to go back to the old house and take a look, and stock up on some grains and things first. My wife still didn't quite understand and said, Even if there's something wrong, I think the city should be safer than the countryside, right? I shook my head and said, Wife, there are so many people and so much going on in the city. If something really happens, we ordinary people will be in a real fix. In the countryside, there's more space, fewer people, and it's easier to be self-sufficient. My wife was a bit worried and asked, Then what about the child? If we both go back to our hometown, who will pick up the child from school? I replied, Let's go back and take a look first, figure out what we have at the old house and what we're lacking, then we'll come back. We won't open the meat shop for now. I'll move all the goods we've purchased these days to the old house and make them into cured bacon for storage. My wife was still a bit worried and said, Should we tell our elder sister about this so that they can also make some preparations? I waved my hand and said, Wife, this is really hard to say. We're not sure yet. If something really happens, elder sister and the others will definitely blame us for not telling them earlier. If nothing happens in the end, elder sister will say that we scared her and made her worry for nothing. Right now, we're just making guesses. It's better not to tell them, so as not to end up in an awkward situation. 07. At present, the supplies at home are as follows. There are 3 large freezers. There is one 10 kW diesel generator. There is a certain amount of diesel reserves, but diesel doesn't work well at low temperatures. It's likely to freeze if it's cold. We need to change to a gasoline generator. There is a cellar, and the entrance is inside the house. Generally, the temperature difference between the cellar and the ground is only about 10 degrees. The house is newly renovated. Because the house is on a hillside, it's quite cold in winter, so when renovating, we were quite generous with the materials. The walls are thicker than those of old-fashioned buildings. The glass is double-layered, and the doors and windows are made of broken bridge aluminum. The walls also have an insulation layer. The traditional heated Kong and fire walls have also been retained. Personally, I think if this house can't withstand the low temperature, the buildings in the city have even less chance. There are solar panels on the roof. After all, it's a rural area in the mountains, and the power supply is not stable. The fuel generator and the solar panels are the guarantees of electricity supply. There are 3 bedrooms and a large living room. There are 2 auxiliary rooms, as well as an independent kitchen, bathroom, and boiler room. Inside the house, there are heated kangs, fire walls, and heating installed. There is no lack of daily household appliances. Since I often come here to process pork, there are TVs, refrigerators, washing machines, and other appliances for daily life. It's cool in the mountains, so there's no air conditioner. The large yard covers an area of 3 mu, surrounding a large cave on the halfway up the hillside and a small factory building, where the diesel generator, freezers, and some sundries are placed. There are wells in both the factory building and the main house, which are commonly known as Old Man's Joy and can be used to collect groundwater, grain reserves, There is some grain stored in the cellar, including 150 gene of rice, 200 gene of flour, 300 gene of sweet potatoes, and a certain amount of oil and salt. There are also some tobacco and alcohol for daily visits with relatives. After all, I'm from a rural background, and I have the habit of storing grain. There are also several jars of loose liquor brewed in the village. All of these are the aftermath of the pandemic. The cellar has a large space and is very dry. There are at least 200 gene of old cured bacon and old hams. These are the goods that we've stored for our own family to eat for several years. There are also dozens of kilograms of lard. There are 2 big dogs in the yard, Black and its wife Yellow, who guard the house. The fence is quite tall, and there is barbed wire on it. My wife and I took stock and were a bit confused. We didn't know what kind of disaster would happen either. We felt that we didn't lack anything, and it was ready for us to move in at any time. For now, we're just making preparations for a relatively long winter. We initially consider using 1 bag of 50 gene of rice and 1 bag of 50 gene of flour per month. Considering that the shelf life of rice is only 18 months and the shelf life of flour is 12 months, we plan to store 18 bags of rice and 12 bags of flour. We plan to buy some vegetables that can be stored for a long time. We're not sure if summer cabbages can be stored well, so we don't dare to buy them, so we still prefer to buy some commonly stocked foods like instant noodles, self-heating pots, compressed biscuits, and various dried foods. We also need to secretly buy some coal because the gas supply may not be available. The most precious supply for heating is coal. How can people in city buildings use it? Install a big boiler in a building? That's ridiculous. To deal with extreme weather, this old house is more suitable. We can do whatever we want here. In previous years, we burned less than 3 tons of coal in the 4 winter months. This year, we'll buy more, but we need to rely on connections to buy it. Let's try to get 12 tons first and then try to get as much as possible. We have enough space at home, so we can store it all. As long as there is enough coal to burn, we definitely won't freeze to death. The more coal, the better. We also need to store some gasoline and diesel, but if we buy them personally, we can't buy a large amount. We'll just buy as much as we can. We also need to store some engine oil and spare parts for the fuel engines. The engine oil needs to be changed every 200 hours. So we need to prepare more engine oil. After considering these supplies, we're still a bit confused. After all, we're just making preparations based on guesses. Disastrous weather can be extremely cold, extremely hot, floods, earthquakes. Currently, it's extremely hot, but I'm more inclined to think that extreme cold weather will occur in the future. It's unknown when it will appear and how long it will last. Also, I suddenly thought of something. As the saying goes, an ordinary man is innocent, but possessing wealth can be his downfall. If a big disaster occurs and I'm the only one who has stocked up so many things, and I'm a small family in this village, then those big families in the village will surely try to take everything from me like hungry wolves. At noon, we had a big meal at the old house. My wife and I checked everything at home. The bedding and other things were all in good condition, and we had a delicious meal. After the meal, I asked my wife to drive back to the city to buy medicine. I specifically told her to buy a lot of commonly used medicine, so as not to end up in a situation like during the pandemic when we couldn't buy it even if we wanted to. As for me, I was thinking about how to get the villagers involved in the preparations together, so as not to become someone else's target. I think after the pandemic, the villagers should have stored some grain at home. There should be no problem with food in the short term, and there is also a deep well in the village for drinking water. I'm just worried that if it's extremely cold, without making preparations in advance, there will be big problems with heating. Throughout history, in which natural disaster wasn't human disaster even more terrifying, stocking up things secretly definitely won't work. We still need to get a group of people to do it together in order to save our own lives. Only when those big families have everything they need will our small families be able to keep our things. During times of great disaster, what we should be most wary of is people's hearts. People's hearts are often like this. They envy you when you have something and look down on you when you don't. It's okay if social order doesn't collapse, but once social order collapses, these feelings will be magnified infinitely. 08. We can't just approach them directly. We need to ask Lennox to step in for this matter. Speaking of Lennox, this name isn't given casually. Lennox's original name is Quinn. He's over 80 years old, but he's still in good health. He had a long friendship with my grandfather. This old man has been on the battlefield and has seen a lot of the world. He has a straightforward personality and a very high prestige in the village. I've always had a good relationship with him. Whenever I have something to ask him, he will always give me advice. He used to be the village head for a few years, and there's nothing in the village that he doesn't know. I'm going to find Lennox and discuss this with him to see what he thinks. If Lennox thinks there's something wrong with this, with his word, the villagers will definitely think twice. As a veteran, he always speaks directly and doesn't beat around the bush. I carried 2 bottles of strong liquor and went straight to Lennox's house. The old man knew exactly what was going on and knew that I must have something to talk about. He's always been straightforward, so he directly told me to speak my mind and not beat around the bush in front of him. So, I told Lennox everything I had seen and heard in the city's villa areas, the situation in my shop, and the matter of my elder sister who works as a nanny, all in detail. After listening, Lennox frowned and pondered for a moment. Then he said, "This matter seems to be quite serious. You were right to come to me. You can't be the one to deal with this. You go back first. I'll go find Dorian, our village head, who is also Quinn's nephew, and ask him to take the lead. You just pretend that you don't know anything and secretly make your preparations." Hearing what Lennox said, I immediately felt more at ease. Before I left, Lennox added another reminder. "You're so thoughtless, just bringing wine and not any cured bacon." "Don't do this next time," I quickly replied. "Lennox, don't worry, there will definitely be enough cured bacon for you." I don't know how things were arranged on their side, but Lennox is really decisive and has great prestige. After dinner in the evening, I was wondering how things would develop when the village head Dorian called. "Griffin, gather at the village committee at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, no excuses. Those who are nearby have to come back. We won't talk about those who are far away for now." "Uncle, I'm right in the village. Is there something wrong?" The village head said sternly. "Don't ask what you shouldn't, just be there on time." After hanging up the phone, I secretly gave Lennox a thumbs up in my heart. He's really reliable. The next morning, I arrived at the village committee on time and found that the village head and Lennox were already there. Several of us who do business in the nearby city were also called back. The village head slammed the door shut and then started scolding. "You little rascals, you only know how to make money outside. You haven't come back to visit the old people at home for so long. Have you forgotten your roots? Do you still want to stay in this village?" Dorian stared at Luca and said, "I heard that you haven't come back to see your father for more than 2 months. What big money are you making that you don't even care about your father?" Luca quickly defended himself. "Uncle, it's not that I don't want to come back. This year's business is really strange. Some people want explosion-proof doors and windows, and some want super strong insulation. All of them are based on the standard of -70 degrees Celsius. My shop's technology couldn't keep up. I was training my workers while working. I was really busy all the time." When Luca said this, everyone started chatting and arguing noisily. Elijah, who is in the logistics business, also chimed in. "This year is really strange. Those rich people are buying things by the truckload. I even suspect that their houses are about to be filled up." Zeke, who is in the clothing and hat wholesale business, also complained. "In the middle of summer, there are very few people buying summer clothes. Everyone is ordering cold-proof clothes. Isn't this crazy? It's the off-season for cold-proof clothes, but this year it's like the peak season." I couldn't help but interrupt. "I also think it's strange. The most popular things bought in my shop are old cured bacon and other foods that can be stored for a long time." Soren, who runs a chain of pharmacies, also scratched his head and said, "There have been a lot more people coming to the pharmacy to buy medicine recently. It's really strange." Knox, the foreman, also continued, "The work in the villa areas is also very strange. They all require the walls to be heightened and reinforced, and an electric fence to be installed. And the construction period is very urgent, as if they're in a hurry for something." Everyone was talking one after another, all expressing the same meaning: preparing for cold weather, stocking up on food and medicine, and preventing riots. The village head then made phone calls to other villagers who were doing business in big cities. The result was the same. There was a strange atmosphere everywhere, and it was all about preparing for cold weather, stocking up, and preventing riots. The room suddenly fell silent. Everyone could feel that something big was about to happen, but they just didn't know exactly what it was. Finally, the village head broke the silence and looked at Lennox, saying, "Uncle, you have the most prestige. What do you think we should do about this?" 09. Lennox said decisively, "I have a hunch that something big is going to happen. Preparing cold-proof clothes and buying insulation supplies indicate that it will be very cold in winter. Preventing riots implies that there may be social unrest. We don't know exactly what will happen, but it's always better to make preparations. Those who can come back to the village should be called back. We won't force those who don't want to come back. Those families with poor conditions can move to live in the village committee. The village committee will also store grain and reinforce the houses, adding heated kangs and firewalls for cold protection. What do you all think? Everyone nodded in agreement and had no objections. Disasters themselves are not the most terrifying thing. What's really terrifying is the unrest that follows social chaos. Therefore, we must unite and face it together. The truth is simple, but not everyone has the courage and charisma like Lennox. I added, Lennox, the drastic change in the weather may not wait until winter. According to our analysis just now, it may happen within the next month or two. We also need to consider the construction period and set a time limit, Luca responded. Currently, all the projects are required to be completed within a month. If we can't finish on time, the owners are even willing to increase the payment on their own initiative. So, it should be about a month from now. Hearing this news, the room fell silent again. Then, Lennox broke the silence. Then we'll make preparations based on a 1-month time limit. Those who can come back should try their best to come back. Call the heads of each family to a meeting. This matter must not be spread outside. In addition, I'm willing to contribute 50,000 yuan to do my part. I'll also move to live in the village committee at that time. Lennox's statement played a leading role. Several villagers from small families also expressed their willingness to contribute money and effort. 30,000 yuan, 50,000 yuan, 100,000 yuan. I also contributed 100,000 yuan. After all, it was me who encouraged Lennox to step forward, not for anything else, but out of admiration for Lennox's sense of responsibility. The most generous one was Soren, who runs the pharmacy. He excitedly expressed that he was willing to contribute 500,000 yuan and would immediately arrange to send the inventory from the pharmacy back to the village. He really went all out. Lennox is saving everyone's lives. Although nothing has happened yet and Soren is still safe, once something happens, as the richest person in the village, he will become an easy target. If everyone makes preparations in advance and has hope of survival, then Soren will be safe in the village. We just need to be on guard against people from other villages. At the same time, I also guess that Soren might know more than we do. After all, he's in the pharmaceutical business and has more connections. Maybe he just doesn't dare to say it. So everyone started to act separately. Zeke began to arrange to send the cold-proof clothes from the shop back to the village. Elijah used a large truck to transport the supplies. I also promised to make a large amount of cured bacon for the villagers. Luca started to transfer the construction team back to the village to first renovate the house of the village committee, reinforce the insulation facilities, and then build heated kangs, fire walls, and even earth kong floor heating. I felt that everyone had already noticed something was wrong, but no one dared to point it out and no one dared to talk about it. They were all secretly making preparations. Now, with Lennox as the backbone, they dared to take action openly. Then, in the name of the village committee, we began to sort out the reserve list. How many people were there in the village? How much grain, fuel, power generation, and water storage were needed, and so on. Although we asked everyone not to spread the news, how could it not be spread? The village is a place where there are a lot of people and a lot of gossip. Soon, the news spread. Some people laughed at our village, and some people came to our village to try to get some information and learn from us. In short, there were all kinds of people. Our village was relatively united. After all, there was a prestigious person like Lennox. He was from a big family in the village, and the people from small families didn't dare to cause trouble. The people from big families, who were all Lennox's juniors, also didn't dare to cause trouble. Occasionally, there were a few people who were lazy and tried to cheat, but these were small matters and couldn't cause much of a commotion for small families. They could just focus on preparing for the natural disaster. At least they didn't have to worry too much about being bullied after the natural disaster. The villagers had stocked up enough food, so there was no need to fight over it. The most surprising and admirable person was still Lennox. Lennox secretly arranged for a few people to get a lot of gunpowder. Lennox also secretly gave me a homemade shotgun. This old man really has connections. He was preparing for the possibility that someone might cause trouble in the future. But, is the disaster really just extremely cold weather? What if the extremely cold weather doesn't come? Lennox will have to bear the anger of the villagers. 10. I chose to stay and live in the old house. I had my own plans. My old house had an excellent location and a high terrain. It was located in the deepest part of the village and backed onto a mountain. If there really was any unrest, I would have more time to deal with it. In the house in the city, I also placed some drinking water and food and other daily necessities, not much, just as a thought for my old neighbors. I couldn't say this directly, but if my neighbors were short of supplies, they would definitely break into my old house. I hope it can help some people. There are some things that can be done, but not said. People's hearts are unpredictable. For the renovation of my old house, in addition to sealing and insulating the house itself, I also added a heated earth Kong, floor heating, and reinforced the cellar. The cellar was the last resort. After all, the cellar was 4 to 5 meters deep. Even in the worst case, it was thicker than the walls of the house. Right. I also prepared a pedal generator, medicine, and so on. I also piled a large part of the coal and firewood indoors. My wife also specially prepared a lot of nutrient soil. I have to admire the wisdom of women. It will bring great joy to our life in the future. There was no change outside the village, except for rumors of the construction of underground fortifications in various places. Social order was still relatively stable. I have to give credit to the country for this, because the weather was getting hotter and hotter. There were more and more rumors in the village. Some people began to speak ill of Lennox behind his back. Lennox didn't care at all. He still demanded that the house of the village committee be further reinforced and the insulation and warmth retention be strengthened. Lennox took the lead and moved in first. 11. At night, the quiet village was surrounded by the deep darkness, with only a few stars twinkling in the sky. I walked outside, intending to get some fresh air, but the scene in front of me left me instantly stunned. The sky seemed to be gently waved by colorful ribbons, green, purple, and red light bands were jumping and intertwining in the air, like a carnival dance in heaven. I had never seen such a beautiful and mysterious scene before. It felt a bit like the aurora I had seen on TV, and I couldn't help but be mesmerized. Just then, strings of sparks burst out from the high-voltage power line tower in the distance, like ignited fireworks, extremely dazzling in the night sky. The lights in the village went out one by one, and the surroundings were plunged into darkness, leaving only the colorful light bands in the sky still dancing. I tried to take out my phone to check what was going on, but found that the phone screen was black and wouldn't respond no matter how I pressed it. Suddenly, a hissing and crackling noise came from the village radio, like the interference caused by unstable current, which made people feel annoyed. All kinds of strange phenomena began to occur in the village one after another. Cars suddenly sounded their alarms, and the headlights flickered on and off, as if echoing the light bands in the sky. The TV screen at home inexplicably turned on and flashed with snowflakes. My heart was filled with doubts and fear. I didn't know what the connection was between this beautiful dance in the sky and these strange phenomena, but I could feel that this peaceful night had been completely changed, with the failure of various electronic devices. The villagers began to panic. They all came out of their houses to check what was happening. When they looked up at the sky, they were all deeply attracted by the magnificent scene. For a moment, the village was in a state of panic, and everyone was guessing what was going on. The power supply was cut off, the communication was interrupted, and the generator was burned out. The village became an information island. The expected extremely cold weather did not come as scheduled. Instead, a wave of heat accompanied by sudden and strange phenomena arrived. The villagers' lives fell into chaos. It was extremely hot and unbearable, and the anger in the villagers' hearts was even more difficult to contain. They angrily gathered in front of the village committee, venting their dissatisfaction towards Lennox. Lennox, look at what's going on. All our electrical appliances are destroyed, and you have to be responsible, roared Jagger, a burly man. His face was red with anger, and his eyes were wide open as he stared at Lennox. The others were also enraged. They waved their arms and kept cursing. In their opinion, Lennox should be fully responsible for this disaster. Their selfishness and ignorance were fully exposed at this moment. They only cared about their own losses. In the face of the villagers' accusations and abuse, Lennox remained calm. He took a deep breath and prepared to explain. However, the villagers didn't want to listen to his explanation. They just wanted to find someone to vent their anger on, someone to take the blame. Just when the tense atmosphere was about to trigger a conflict, I struggled to push through the crowd. I picked up the homemade shotgun, pulled the trigger towards the sky, and there was a loud bang. This gunshot instantly suppressed the villagers' anger, and the scene suddenly fell silent. I stood in front of Lennox, holding the shotgun tightly in my hand, and shouted loudly, "Whoever dares to take another step forward, try it." Jagger said disdainfully to me, "Griffin, what are you getting involved in? This is our family's business. You're an outsider, so stay out of it." Although I knew that Jagger was a jerk and a rascal, I didn't expect that in the face of interests, he would dare to be so arrogant and provoke Lennox. I didn't respond, but just pointed the muzzle of the gun at him silently. Seeing this, Jagger flinched and didn't dare to act rashly anymore. Lennox was very calm. He motioned for me to step aside and then said contemptuously to Jagger, "Jagger, who do you think you are? Call your father here. You're not qualified to act arrogantly here." Jagger retorted unyieldingly, "Lennox, you could have let everyone prepare in advance, but now we've suffered heavy losses. Don't you think you should give us an explanation?" Jagger's few lackeys also chimed in, "That's right. We all did as Lennox told us to do. Lennox, you have to be responsible for our losses." I was filled with anger. These people were really shameless. Lennox remained unmoved. He took the homemade shotgun from my hand and aimed it at the wooden stick in the hand of one of Jagger's lackeys. With a bang, the wooden stick broke in two. The young man was so scared that he wet his pants, and his face turned pale. This gunshot completely intimidated the scene. He held the gun and asked coldly, "I didn't hear clearly just now. Who wants to tell me exactly what's going on?" Surprisingly, no one came forward to speak. At this time, the voice of the village head Dorian came from the crowd. "Everyone, calm down. Please listen to me for a moment." The villagers started whispering again. The cold protection and reinforcement were decisions made by the village committee, and it has nothing to do with Lennox personally. The damage to the electrical appliances today is entirely due to the natural disaster, which is beyond human control, said Dorian. The villagers were still not satisfied and demanded a clear solution from the village. In the face of the villagers' intense emotions, Dorian made a promise regarding the losses caused to everyone by the cold protection and reinforcement. The village will be fully responsible for compensation. The damage to the electrical appliances today is purely due to the natural disaster and has nothing to do with Lennox. The village will do its best to assist everyone in issuing certificates, handling insurance claims, or reporting the situation to the higher authorities, and will try its best to strive for more compensation for everyone. Hearing that there was hope for compensation, the villagers gradually calmed down, and the scene gradually returned to order. Just then, Jagger's father finally showed up. He grabbed Jagger's ear hard and dragged him all the way in front of Lennox, and apologized to Lennox. Jagger's father had a face full of guilt and apology, and kept bowing and apologizing, saying that he would discipline his son well. After this series of twists and turns, the matter was finally truly resolved. However, the behavior of Jagger and his father made me extremely disgusted. 12. It was only a few days later that we learned that the largest solar electromagnetic storm in history had occurred. The power supply and communication had all been damaged to varying degrees. It would still take a considerable amount of time to restore the communication and power supply. Most of the civilian electrical appliances and equipment had been damaged. Many villagers had their own thoughts, and they were no longer enthusiastic about the cold protection arrangements. However, Lennox still led a group of people to continue repairing the house of the village committee. He even felt that what had been done so far was far from enough. Lennox was also arranging for people to repair the generators and other machinery in the village, but the progress was not optimistic. Some people also left the village, but these people didn't know that an even greater disaster was really about to come. For days before the disaster occurred, the temperature suddenly soared. The sun hung high in the sky like a ball of fire, as if it was going to melt the whole world. People walking under the scorching sun felt as if they were being roasted by flames. There was dissatisfaction and anxiety in the village. Some people began to blame Lennox again, as if he could control the weather. 3 days before the disaster, the heat did not subside but became even more intense. The place where people lived in the village committee became extremely hot. Some people chose to move back to their own homes because they couldn't stand such an environment. People's hearts became even more scattered. 2 days before the disaster, the heat wave raged even more. Even in the shade, there was no sense of coolness. The wind carried a burning temperature. To make matters worse, some villagers found that the wells in their homes had dried up. Lennox took the lead in stockpiling water decisively, but his action attracted the criticism of some villagers. They complained and doubted Lennox's motives to his face. I went to the village committee again and asked Lennox to come to my place. Lennox refused. Lennox insisted on staying in the village committee. When I got home, I also started to stockpile as much water as possible. Fortunately, both of my old man's joy wells could still draw water. One day before the disaster, the sun was still scorching hot, but there was a strange silence all around. The chirping of birds and the sounds of insects in the mountains and forests had all disappeared, leaving only a deathly stillness. This oppressive atmosphere made more people choose to leave. Some people who had left before also returned to the village and brought shocking news from the city. The army was transferring a large number of residents. This news caused a great stir in the village. However, the tense atmosphere and the questioning of Lennox also reached their peak at the same time. Lennox completely ignored these negative voices. My wife, my child, and I all stayed at home and did not go out. The two big dogs were also lying in the house. On the day of the incident, the temperature rose again, the sun was blazing, and the sunlight was so intense that it could almost melt everything. No one dared to stay outdoors for a long time, otherwise their skin would probably be burned. Some of the young people in the village were provoked by the heat and became dissatisfied again. They began to try to incite everyone to demand an explanation from Lennox, believing that all of this was Lennox's fault. Those brazen young people, not knowing the limits of their abilities, were wandering outside the village committee. They gathered outside the village committee with ill intentions, attempting to cause trouble and disrupt the order of the village to gain their own self-interests. Unfortunately, they simply couldn't withstand the invasion of the intense heat. Unable to endure the high temperature, they were defeated one by one after a short while and slunk away like stray dogs. At noon, the mountains and forests became even quieter, as if the whole world had held its breath. At this moment, there was not even a trace of wind or a sound. This kind of stillness made people feel an indescribable fear. It was terrifyingly quiet. Suddenly, an intermittent sound came from the radio. Zizla, these days by the solar electromagnetic storm. A lot of communication equipment destroyed, is still being gradually repaired. Zizla, communication may still be interrupted at any time. Please do not go out at home, is expected to appear extreme cold weather. Zizla, please stay indoors, do not go out to pay attention to prevent extreme cold weather. The radio repeated this several times, and then the signal seemed to be interrupted again. The sound of Zizizi returned. The villagers laughed. In such a hot day, which fool was pretending to say that there would be extremely cold weather? Many villagers didn't believe it, and some even went to the mountains to enjoy the cool. I checked all the things again to ensure that I could light the stove at any time. I checked all the cold-proof clothes again. It was so hot that I broke out in a sweat while checking these. 13. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was awakened by the continuous barking of Black and Yellow. The child was scared and started crying. And my wife was comforting the child. There was fear in Black's eyes as it stared outside and barked wildly. I suddenly felt a chill and shivered all over. There was a cracking sound outside. There was also the sound of the glass in the room breaking. Damn it, the ground in the yard is freezing, I shouted. The ground was visibly freezing rapidly and moving towards the house. I shouted to my wife, you and the child go to the cellar quickly. I quickly started to light the fire on my side. The gasoline for the stove was already prepared, and the fire was lit immediately. It even burned a large patch of my hair. I called Black over. I quickly closed the door of the house. The fire was lit, but the speed at which the ground was freezing didn't stop. Ice also appeared on the roof and slowly pressed down towards me. There was fear in Black's barking. Black's wife had already been dragged to the cellar by my wife. I didn't have time to think too much, although the fire in the stove was lit. It still needed time to warm up. I just lit a fire directly in the room. I couldn't care too much. First, I had to avoid being frozen to death. There was firewood prepared in advance in the room. I carried a bundle and placed it in the middle of the room, poured gasoline on it, and then lit it. The flames shot up instantly, although it was dangerous. I felt that the speed at which the ice on the wall was spreading downwards had decreased, but the ice was still slowly spreading downwards. Then I heard a clear click. The thermometer on the wall cracked. The lowest temperature that thermometer could measure was -30 degrees Celsius. I added some more firewood to the fire on the ground. The fire in the coal stove finally burned vigorously. At this time, I felt a little more relaxed. Only then did I realize that my body was aching from the cold. My wife came out of the cellar and put a fur coat on me, telling me to go into the cellar quickly. I saw that the fire had risen. And at least the coal stove wouldn't go out, so I pulled my wife and Black and we all got into the cellar together. My wife and the child were already fully dressed for warmth, looking like big balls. There was no stove in the cellar, but there was a stove above the cellar. The cold air shouldn't penetrate easily, and it was 4 to 5 meters deep. I put on my cold-proof clothes in the cellar. I told the child and my wife to stay down there properly. The child had stopped crying, but was also a bit dazed. I guess he was a bit frightened. I had to go up and guard the stove. The stove couldn't be allowed to go out. It was the hope for our whole family. If the fire in the stove went out, our whole family would be finished. My wife, with tears in her eyes, held onto me tightly and sobbed, not wanting me to go up, but I had no choice but to go up. It said that after 10 years of marriage, a kiss between a couple can turn a nightmare into a series of good dreams, but still. I hugged my wife and kissed her on the cheek. This woman was rather strange. Instead of kicking me, she just said, "Come down quickly if there's any situation. If we're going to die, let's die together as a family. The child and I will be waiting for you in the cellar." When I went back to the ground again, a large area around the walls of the room was already covered in ice. However, the heated Kong and the firewall were still working well. They didn't have ice on them, but they were making pop 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 sounds. I didn't know if the bricks would break under the extremely cold weather. I was really worried. I was afraid that the bricks wouldn't be able to withstand the drastic change in temperature and would break. With my limited scientific knowledge, these traditional methods still carried a great deal of risk. The windows of this room had been sealed up in advance. Otherwise, the window glass would definitely have broken. Who could have imagined that the temperature would drop so suddenly and drastically? The lowest temperature marked on the thermometer was minus 30 degrees Celsius. The thermometer had already been frozen and cracked, which meant that the temperature just now was far lower than minus 30 degrees Celsius. The fire in the coal stove was burning more and more vigorously and there was no sign of it going out. The ice on the wall also didn't continue to spread and there was no sign of it melting either. At present, it seemed that a balance had been reached. The cellar was under the room, so the temperature in the cellar shouldn't drop any further. I felt a bit more at ease. Looking at the fire in the stove, I added some more coal. I also added some more firewood to the fire in the middle of the room. I mumbled to myself, no matter how cold it gets, it shouldn't be able to freeze the fire, right? As long as the fire doesn't go out, our family can survive. I guarded the stove, but I still felt cold, so I went back into the cellar again. I told my wife that the temperature had stabilized. My wife finally felt relieved. My wife and I said in unison, "We can survive like this." There was a pedal generator in the cellar. With the light on, it wasn't dark. There was also a thermometer hanging there. And the temperature was minus 20 degrees Celsius. It was cold, but with the warm clothes, at least we could still survive for now. I hugged my wife and our 2 children. We encouraged each other, but we were all dressed so thickly, like big balls, that we couldn't really hug properly. Holding hands was already a way for our family to be together. My wife and I were on the outside, and the 2 children were in the middle. The 2 dogs were also whining pitifully. I took out 2 big quilts and placed them around. The 2 big dogs got inside, and they were really frozen. We were really grateful to Black and Yellow, otherwise, we would have frozen to death in our sleep. My wife and I sighed. Just then, I wonder how many people had died. This rapid drop in temperature made me experience a scene just like in the movie, The Day After Tomorrow. I had always thought those scenes in the movie were made up. Now I knew that the ground and the walls could really freeze rapidly before one's eyes. I guessed blindly that the temperature outside was at least minus 40 or minus 50 degrees Celsius. It turned out that humans could still survive in such low temperatures. I didn't know how things were going at the village committee. I hoped Lennox was okay. Our family had survived the first critical moment. As long as the temperature didn't drop any further, our family could live on. 14. My wife was holding the child in her arms and said plaintively, "With such a big disaster, what on earth are those so-called experts doing?" I said, "These so-called experts also have their uses." My wife asked in confusion, "Why, are we just raising these experts for nothing?" I explained, "If the experts publicly said that the end of the world was coming, do you know what the consequences would be?" My wife said casually, "What consequences?" "We would make preparations in advance and actively try to save ourselves." I said seriously, "You're wrong. Then we might not even live to see the disaster happen. We could be killed by the people around us. My wife didn't understand. Why? I asked rhetorically. Has Lennox been wronged? Has he had to bear the pressure? How many people have thanked Lennox? Today, there were still people who wanted to cause trouble for Lennox. This is just in one village. How many people are there in a city? If people knew in advance that the end of the world was coming, society would be in chaos. My wife wiped her tears gently with her trembling hand. Her voice was low and trembly. A lot of people will definitely die this time. I hugged my wife and children tightly and said, at least our whole family is still alive. That's enough. I looked at the temperature in the cellar again. It was still minus 20 degrees Celsius. It seemed that the temperature outside had stabilized. I went out of the cellar again and checked the coal stove. The coal was burning well. The firewood on the ground had already burned out. Although the room was still very cold, there were no more changes to the surroundings and the ground. The sudden drop in temperature seemed to have ended. I didn't have the courage to move too far away from the coal stove. After all, I had never experienced such extreme cold. Who knew what would happen if I opened the door of the house? It was good enough for our family to stay here like this. A voice came from the cellar. The child is hungry. Get something to eat. I was really in a dilemma. We had stored water, but it had frozen. The old man's joy, well, also seemed to be frozen. At least I didn't dare to go over there because the ground was covered in ice. I went back into the cellar, picked up a large iron bucket and placed it on the stove. The water in the iron bucket had all frozen. I just put it on the stove and started to heat it, but I wasn't in a hurry. After all, there were still several buckets of water. I could heat it slowly. After a rather long time, the ice in the bucket melted. Then I found an iron kettle and started to boil water. Although it was a bit slow, the water could still be boiled. I once thought that water couldn't be boiled at such a low temperature. I was being ignorant. Thinking optimistically, I had learned something new. Water could be boiled even in extremely cold environments. I couldn't help but smile foolishly at the boiling water. Perhaps this was the feeling of surviving a disaster. Then I made self-heating rice and hot water for my wife, children, and Black and its wife. After eating and drinking, we could feel warmer. There was also a bit of warmth in the cellar. This period of time wasn't boring. I pedaled the pedal generator, and the light provided enough illumination. My wife and I didn't have much education. At this moment, my wife picked up a book that she hadn't read for a long time and started playing games and telling stories with the child. It looked quite warm and cozy. Although it was a disaster, it was rare that we didn't have to worry about making a living for a few pennies. It was a kind of peaceful time in the midst of the apocalypse. I would also fiddle with the radio from time to time. There was still only the sound. This meant that the situation outside was still rather bad. At least the communication hadn't been restored yet. But I firmly believed that the country would come to rescue us, so I would adjust the radio many times a day to search for channels. Time passed neither quickly nor slowly. The two children gradually got used to the current environment and would occasionally take the initiative to come out of the cellar. The two children were in front of the coal stove, roasting sweet potatoes and warming their hands, enjoying this simple warmth. Children were always carefree. The tense emotions of these few days also began to relax. At night, I slept very soundly. 15. A voice came from the radio. ZZ, XX City, XX Road has built a number of locations. ZZ, Rescue Center, in some parts of the electric power and communication are gradually recovering. Believe tenacious of life, pray for the miracle of life. Please hold on. ZZ, we never give up. Rescue Team, ZZ, full rescue operation has been carried out. Try to leave a message in the obvious place for the rescue team to search and rescue. My wife and I listened to this repeated recording over and over again. We hugged each other and cried. Finally, the day we had been waiting for had arrived. Finally, my wife and I used coal ash to write a big SOS in an open area. Finally, the rescue team arrived. We were taken to a snow-armored vehicle by the soldiers. You're safe now. I also saw many villagers in the vehicle, with expressions of joy on their faces after surviving the disaster. All the way, we were heading towards the relief center. When we passed through the urban area, on both sides of the street, the originally prosperous shops and buildings were covered with thick ice and snow, looking dilapidated and silent. The windows of the buildings were broken, and the glass shards were swaying in the cold wind, making a sharp sound. The exposed steel bars and the broken walls and ruins looked even more desolate in the wind and snow. On the road, the thick snow almost covered everything. Occasionally, the frozen heads of people would be exposed, which was really shocking. Their faces were twisted, and their eyes were empty, as if telling the fear and despair of their lives before death. Their bodies were buried deep in the snow, leaving only a deathly silence. In some rooms, people who had been instantly frozen could also be seen. They maintained the postures they had at the moment of death. Some were curled up in the corner, some were lying on the ground, and some were still sitting on the sofa. There was fear and helplessness in their eyes, which made people unable to bear to look directly. My wife tightly covered the child's eyes. There were tears in her eyes, but she held them back. She was afraid that this cruel reality would scare the child. She nestled in my arms, and her body trembled involuntarily, as if looking for a little bit of security. I hugged her tightly, wanting to pass on my strength and courage to her, letting her know that no matter when, I would be by her side to protect her and the child. "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid," I whispered in her ear. "Our whole family is still alive." We were settled in the underground relief center. As soon as we entered, the lights were bright, and a warm atmosphere rushed towards us. It made me temporarily forget the extreme cold and horror outside. Our tense nerves relaxed a little bit, just as we were feeling relieved. Suddenly, a sharp cry came from a distance, breaking the short-lived tranquility. Then, the originally stable lights began to flicker, going on and off. People began to panic and looked around, not knowing what to do. The sounds of footsteps, shouts, and collisions intertwined, forming a terrifying symphony of fear. I looked towards the distance in confusion and saw a group of people with strange appearances slowly approaching us. Their bodies were twisted, as if they were not in control of themselves, and their faces showed ferocious expressions. The people nearby began to run, trying to escape the pursuit of these monsters. However, some people couldn't avoid them and were suddenly knocked down by these monsters. Then, the spine-chilling sounds of biting and the desperate screams echoed all around. I realized in horror that these monsters were actually zombies. I looked around, searching for a way to escape, but there were only chaotic crowds and the roars of zombies all around. Just when I was in a state of panic, I suddenly found that my wife's eyes had turned blood red. Her body also began to twitch violently and uncontrollably. She suddenly pounced on me and bit my neck. I let out a terrified scream and tried to push her away, but I couldn't break free at all. The pain spread throughout my body. I watched helplessly as she turned into a zombie. Her eyes were like a stagnant pool of water, without any vitality, and became dull and empty. I struggled, trying to find a glimmer of hope for survival, but the surroundings had become a paradise for zombies, and the screams of humans could be heard one after another, in despair. The voice from the broadcast in the relief center came. "Zazila, please don't come to XX City, XX Rescue Center. Please stay away from here. Zazila, found here. Be sure to stay away from this. I suddenly woke up from my dream, covered in cold sweat, and my heart was still beating rapidly. All around was silent, with only the cold wind howling outside. I gasped for breath, trying to calm down the fear in my heart. It turned out to be another nightmare. My wife and child were still sleeping soundly beside me. We were still in the old house, taking shelter from the extreme cold. The fear and pain in that dream were too real, as if I had just experienced a life-and-death disaster. 16. I couldn't fall asleep anymore. I stood up and carved the vertical lines that I recorded every day on the ground. At this moment, there were already dozens of these dense vertical lines on the ground. On this day, I found that the ice on the walls of the room began to melt, and the ice layer on the ground had also disappeared without a trace. The thick clothes felt a bit hot. Strangely enough, it was still very cold in the cellar. I don't know why. Does anyone know? Please give me some scientific explanation. Then, my wife, child, and the two dogs, black and yellow, moved back to live on the ground. After such a long time, I finally summoned up the courage to open the door for the first time. The world outside was covered in white snow. I fiddled with the radio again. There was still only the sound. We weren't in a hurry. The biggest crisis was the low temperature, and we had survived it for now. We didn't have to worry about food and drink. It was quite good to just stay like this. The children were carefree. The children and Black and its wife were chasing and playing around in the house. However, the children were prohibited from going outside. We didn't know what the temperature was outside. The 52-degree baijiu, Chinese liquor, that I threw outside these days had frozen. The 60-degree baijiu hadn't frozen yet. Although the temperature was very low, we didn't have to worry about being robbed. At this temperature, An ordinary person couldn't stay outside for long. If someone wanted to come out and rob, they probably wouldn't even reach the place before they froze into ice. Even if there hadn't been the damage caused by the previous solar electromagnetic storm, ordinary civilian things like solar panels, fuel generators, and cars couldn't withstand such extreme cold. Minus 30 degrees Celsius was already the limit for these civilian electrical appliances and equipment, not to mention the current extreme cold that could freeze 52-degree by Jill. I had previously thought about clearing the snow in front of the door with a shovel. But when I just tapped the ground lightly with the shovel broke. My wife and I didn't plan to go out of the house either. We just tidied up the other closed rooms to expand our living space. The coal and firewood had also filled a whole room, which was enough to keep us warm for a long time. My wife developed a new skill, growing vegetables. Only then did I realize that the nutrient soil my wife had prepared earlier came in handy, although it was cold outside. The room was already very warm at present. My wife started growing vegetables on the heated Kong, and I studied making frozen pears and frozen apples. I can responsibly tell everyone that frozen pears are much more delicious than frozen apples. Everyone should give it a try if they have the chance. We didn't have to worry about food, and there was enough water. Even if the water wasn't enough, there was snow outside. The outside world was like the end of the world. But here I felt a kind of peaceful time in the apocalypse. We didn't have to worry about personal safety either, with this terrible weather outside. If there were really bad guys who could manage to come here, I would actually admire their courage. Moreover, I still had the homemade shotgun that Lennox had prepared for me in my hand. In my spare time, I would fiddle with the radio and try to get in touch with the outside world. There was no movement in the village at the foot of the mountain either. I wasn't curious. I understood the principle that curiosity killed the cat. However, I could see wisps of smoke rising from the village in the distance. Fire is the seed of human civilization. The presence of smoke meant that the people in the village were all still alive, and we weren't alone. It was still better to stay at home, just wait quietly like this. Just as I was slowly enjoying this peaceful time, and trying to forget that terrifying nightmare with its overly real fear and pain, a voice came from the radio. Zizizi, multiple rescue centers have been established on XX Road, XX City, Zizizi. The locations are, the electricity and communication in some areas are gradually being restored. Believe in the tenacity of life. Pray for the miracle of life. Please hold on. We will never give up. Zizizi, the rescue team, Zizizi, has fully launched the rescue operation. My wife burst into tears of joy and picked up the child who was playing. She said, "The rescue is coming. The rescue is coming." Then there were bursts of firecracker sounds in the village, as if the villagers were shouting out their hope. In the surrounding villages, the sounds of firecrackers also went off one after another, conveying endless joy and hope. My wife murmured, "It's so good that everyone is still alive. Everyone is alive." The child asked in confusion, "Mom, is it the spring festival? Why is everyone setting off firecrackers?" My wife hugged the child and said, "The rescue team is coming, husband. Let's also go and set off firecrackers to celebrate." My wife's growing vegetables on the heated Kong also usher in the first wave of harvest. A cucumber. My wife is still working hard to research and try growing chives blanched in the dark and lettuce. I just haven't come back to my senses yet, and I think of that terrifying nightmare of entering the relief center again. It's so good to be alive. Story 2. My wife and I are pork vendors. When the extreme cold hit, our family fled back to our rural hometown and waited for rescue, relying on the cellar, heated Kong, a traditional heated brick bed in northern China, and heated walls. Finally, we were taken to an underground rescue center by the rescue team. Just when we were rejoicing at having escaped the disaster, a sudden rat infestation shattered this peace. To make matters worse, zombies unexpectedly appeared afterwards. Inside the rescue center were bloodthirsty zombies. And outside was a world sealed by extreme cold, facing difficulties both inside and outside. How will my wife and I find a glimmer of hope? 1. My name is Griffin. My wife and I run a pork shop together. Before the outbreak of the extreme cold, we took refuge in our rural hometown in advance. With the help of the cellar, the heated Kong, and the heated walls, our family finally managed to endure through it. Finally, we waited for the rescue team. The soldiers took us onto a snow-armored vehicle. "You're safe now," the soldier said. In the vehicle, I also saw many villagers. There was joy on their faces after surviving the disaster. The armored vehicle sped all the way towards the rescue center. When passing through the urban area, on both sides of the street, the once prosperous shops and buildings were covered by thick ice and snow, looking dilapidated and silent. The windows of the buildings were broken. The shards of glass swayed in the cold wind, making a sharp sound. The exposed steel bars and the broken walls and ruins looked even more desolate in the wind and snow. On the road, the thick snow almost covered everything. Occasionally, the frozen heads of people would be exposed, which was truly terrifying. Their faces were distorted, and their eyes were empty, as if telling the fear and despair of their lives before death. Their bodies were buried deep in the snow, leaving only a deathly silence. In some rooms, people who had been instantly frozen could also be seen. They maintained the postures they had at the moment of death. Some were curled up in the corner, some were lying on the ground, and some were still sitting on the sofa. There was fear and helplessness in their eyes, which made people unable to bear to look directly. My wife tightly covered the child's eyes. There were tears in her eyes, but she held them back. She was afraid that this cruel reality would scare the child. She nestled in my arms, and her body trembled involuntarily, as if looking for a little bit of security. I hugged her tightly, wanting to pass on my strength and courage to her, letting her know that no matter when, I would be by her side to protect her and the child. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid, I whispered in her ear. Our whole family is still alive, too. The moment we arrived at the underground rescue center, we truly felt the vastness and grandeur of this project. It was as if the entire city had been moved underground as a whole, and we were assigned to Area C of the Underground Rescue Center, which was the agricultural production area. According to a young soldier, due to the high population density in the rescue center at present, in order to prevent the outbreak of infectious diseases, the center has been carefully divided into several independent areas for effective isolation, in order to ensure the safety of everyone. Strict measures have been implemented inside the rescue center, restricting the cross-regional movement of non-staff members. This practice of regional isolation is of great importance, because without isolation, the appearance of any infectious disease may quickly lead to the loss of control of the epidemic. During this special period, following these regulations has become the responsibility of each of us, so that we can jointly protect the safety of everyone. Fortunately, the rescue center is also being continuously expanded, and we believe that the situation will gradually improve. When we got out of the armored vehicle and stepped into Area C, the bright lights and warm air rushed towards us. Although the environment here has been carefully created to be as comfortable as possible, as an underground space, it is still difficult to completely eliminate the unique smell of dampness and soil. Subsequently, several more armored vehicles arrived at Area C one after another. When one of them slowly stopped, I was pleasantly surprised to find the figure of Lennox. He was still in good health and full of energy, maintaining the fortitude and tenacity unique to a soldier who had been on the battlefield in the past. Seeing me, he shouted joyfully, "I knew you were lucky enough to survive. It's great that you're alive." The people from our village were all arranged in Area C uniformly. This long-lost sense of familiarity brought us great comfort. We all gathered together, sharing our life experiences during the extreme cold, and all lamenting that it was really lucky to have survived the disaster. In the atmosphere of laughter, joy, and reunion after a long separation, we temporarily forgot the extreme cold and horror outside. The warmth and peace here brought a rare relief to our tense nerves. In the Underground Rescue Center, we have gradually adapted to the new living environment. The managers of the rescue center have considered everything very carefully. They have rationally assigned work tasks according to everyone's specialties and physical conditions. People who are a bit older have been assigned to the sanitation posts, while those with rich planting experience are responsible for the work related to crop cultivation. Although the school is still under construction, there are also special people to take care of the children. Comparatively speaking, I am quite lucky, because I have been assigned to the transportation post. My main job is to transport the ripe fruits and vegetables in Area C to the entrances of various areas to ensure that everyone can enjoy fresh food. In addition, I am also responsible for timely transporting the supplies needed in Area C back to meet our daily needs. Although life is busy, everyone has a relieved smile on their face. The Underground Rescue Center certainly cannot be compared with the living environment before the end of the world, but it has become our new home, a home where we can live a stable life. Here, we work together, face difficulties together, and dream of returning to the ground to rebuild our former homeland. The outside world has become strange and dangerous. Many animals and plants have died because they could not adapt to the extreme cold environment. However, the ground is not completely a forbidden area. Since I am in charge of transportation, I know that there are still many survivors on the ground who choose to live independently. Although they are reluctant to enter the underground rescue center, they will exchange supplies with the rescue center. There is also a group of people equipped with special cold-resistant equipment. They are actively carrying out construction, search and rescue, and other work on the ground, which brings us infinite hope. What pleases me the most is that Black and Yellow, as members of our family, have reunited with us in the Underground Rescue Center. They also actively participate in various tasks of the rescue center, especially showing excellent skills in rat catching. Because the number of rats in the underground shelter has surged and has become a serious problem. 3. At first, people didn't pay much attention to the appearance of the rats, especially in our Area C. Area C is mainly responsible for agricultural production, and there are many villagers who have migrated from the countryside. The villagers brought local dogs and cats, and these natural rat catchers seem to be able to enjoy the fun of catching rats every day. However, as time passed, everyone gradually realized the seriousness of the situation. We found that the local dogs and cats are now actually having difficulty dealing with the increasingly rampant rats. These rats seem to have become extremely cunning and agile overnight. Not only has their number not decreased, but it has increased sharply. Everyone began to feel panicked, and even speculated whether this indicated the coming of some kind of disaster, such as an earthquake, because in folklore, before major disasters like earthquakes occur, wild animals often sense it in advance and show abnormal behavior. This panicked mood spread rapidly in the rescue center like wildfire. As an agricultural area, Area C has not only accommodated the villagers from our village, but also arranged many villagers from other villages, and the population is quite large, for the convenience of management. The living area of Area C has also been carefully divided according to the population of the original administrative villages. This management method has a dual impact. On the one hand, it allows people to live together with their familiar companions, thus reducing the discomfort in an unfamiliar environment. On the other hand, due to the limited resources, there are occasionally small-scale disputes between different administrative villages over the allocation of living resources. However, these disputes have, to some extent, enhanced the cohesion and cooperation spirit within each administrative village. Although there are disputes wherever there are people, it is indeed reassuring to have a group of united and helpful partners around. We villagers from the same village were naturally all arranged in the same living area of Area C. After the extreme cold disaster, Lennox's prestige in our village has been increasing day by day. Therefore, everyone often gathers together at Lennox's call to discuss countermeasures. One day when I returned from delivering goods, I found that Soren was talking to Lennox. Soren asked with a worried expression, "Lennox, looking at the current situation, is something else going to happen? The rats are gathering and appearing more and more frequently. I'm worried if this is a precursor to an earthquake." Lennox responded firmly, "Before you were born, I experienced an earthquake firsthand. Before an earthquake, animals such as rats, snakes, dogs, and cats will show abnormal behavior, but this time, only the rats are acting abnormally, and the cats and dogs we brought are all normal. This does not fully conform to the signs before an earthquake." At this moment, I walked into the room. Soren turned to me and asked, "Griffin, you need to shuttle between various areas when delivering goods. Have you noticed any unusual phenomena?" I replied, "Soren, although I often deliver goods in various areas, I usually only load and unload goods at the entrances and don't go deep into the interiors of other areas. I haven't heard any abnormal news from the workers there, and I haven't seen any rats outside either. To be honest, during this special period, everyone may not dare to discuss casually, but what is certain is that the rats in our Area C are indeed a bit strange." Finally, everyone had different opinions, and we all felt that there was indeed a problem with the rats. However, if we say that this is a sign of an impending earthquake, the other animals we observed, such as cats, dogs, cows, and sheep, have not shown any abnormal behavior, and the speculation about the outbreak of a flood is even more ridiculous, because if there is really a flood outside, it would instead mean that the temperature has returned to normal. After a long discussion, we still did not reach a clear conclusion. Finally, Lennox told everyone to be on high alert. This may just be a simple rat infestation, but we still need to prevent the occurrence of the plague. At the same time, Graham, the manager of Area C, has also noticed the problem of the rat infestation and is actively applying to the superior unit for the allocation of rat poison. In just a few days, the activities of the rats in Area C became more and more rampant. They even began to besiege the local dogs and cats. Even these rat-catching experts were overwhelmed in the face of such a large rat swarm and were unable to contain their crazy behavior. Fortunately, the rat poison was finally transported to Area C at this critical moment. Preventing and controlling the rat infestation requires a high degree of precision. As for the placement of rat poison, we must take unified action, otherwise, the rats will quickly identify the poison, and there may be a situation where the rats retaliate by poisoning humans. According to some popular science materials, the intelligence of rats should not be underestimated. The intelligence of an adult rat can be comparable to that of a 7-year-old child. At first, the effect of the rat poison was indeed remarkable, and the number of rats decreased significantly, but the good times didn't last long. Soon, the rats reappeared in large numbers, and they had already learned how to identify and avoid poison food, and even began to actively poison humans. This change shows that this group of rats has become extremely cunning. They can not only identify poison but also launch a retaliatory attack on humans. In addition to poisoning the water source and food, they also unbridledly attack cats and dogs. In Area C, there were even incidents where local cats and dogs were besieged and killed by the rat swarm, although there has been no situation where the rats besiege humans yet. Facing the increasingly rampant rat infestation, the villagers in Area C feel unprecedented panic and helplessness. In order to effectively deal with the rat infestation, Graham, the manager of Area C, urgently applied for a large number of rat-catching devices, including mousetraps, rat cages, nooses, pressure plates, and electronic rat traps. Therefore, a large-scale rat-catching operation was quickly launched in Area C. 1 or 2 rats may be easy to deal with, but when thousands of rats emerge like a tide, it constitutes a real rat infestation. Such a scene is simply a nightmare for people with trypophobia and can even make them faint on the spot. In fact, in the face of such a large-scale rat infestation, human power seems rather weak. Should we use fire in such a closed underground space? It's better to give up this idea as soon as possible, unless you want to meet the king of hell earlier than the rats. Should we use chemical poisons in an underground environment with poor ventilation? I'm afraid that people will not be able to hold on before the rats are poisoned to death. At present, the high-voltage electric rat exterminator is a relatively effective rat-killing tool. People use this device to catch and eliminate the rats scurrying around. At the same time, people also adopt the method of pouring cement to block the rat holes to prevent new rats from crawling out of the holes. In the initial stage, these 2 methods did achieve obvious results. However, as time passed, an astonishing phenomenon gradually emerged. The rats seemed to be afraid of something, but it was obviously not humans. Even more strangely, the rats seemed extremely afraid of returning to their own holes. These rats were actually willing to risk being electrocuted by the high-voltage electricity and desperately fled from the holes. Their goal was clear: to escape from Area C and leave this underground space that the villagers regarded as a safe shelter. This abnormal escape behavior strongly suggests that there may be some kind of threat in the rat holes that makes them feel extremely afraid. Graham was worried that the rat infestation would spread further beyond Area C, so he decided to close the isolation gate of Area C. This kind of gate is designed like the fireproof door of an underground shopping mall. Although it is not completely airtight, it can also play a certain blocking role. However, unexpectedly, this measure did not stop the rats from escaping. This time, the rats swarmed out of the holes like a tide. They were not afraid of the threat of the high-voltage rat exterminator at all. During the escape, they also seemed indifferent to the presence of humans and just focused on escaping outward. When facing the obstruction of the isolation gate, the rat swarm actually adopted the tactic of stacking up like a pyramid, layer upon layer, trying to climb over this obstacle, as if there was a more terrifying force chasing them closely behind. Obviously, these rats were carrying out an organized collective escape. They were in groups and rushed forward recklessly. Before long, the isolation gate was successfully breached by them, and the rat swarm fled from Area C. Facing such a scene, people felt both panicked and helpless, because not only humans, but also other animals such as cats, dogs, cows, and sheep showed deep fear of this group of escaping rats. The ground of the entire Area C was densely covered with escaping rats, and this scene was truly terrifying. The escape process lasted for about an hour, and then everything gradually returned to calm. Incredibly, all the rats in Area C disappeared within such a short time. We didn't care about the situation outside Area C, because we were still in a state of panic. At this moment, the entire Area C fell into an unusual silence. So quiet that even the sound of a needle dropping could be clearly heard. In this deathly silence, some cats and dogs suddenly became extremely nervous. They stared intently at the rat holes that had not yet been blocked. These animals, which usually enjoyed catching rats, were now with their bodies tensed up, and there was an indescribable tension and fear in their eyes. They growled in a low voice, and the sound emanating from their throats was both like a suppressed roar and a groan out of fear. These cats and dogs were now showing an unprecedented look of fear towards the rat holes, as if there was some indescribable horror hidden in the deep holes, making them feel afraid and reluctant to approach. Something is going to happen. There must be something big coming. This thought suddenly flashed in my mind. After a long time, everyone finally came back to their senses from the shock. Someone cursed angrily. "This is really crazy." I gradually realized that this place was not suitable to stay for long. Wild animals have a much keener perception of danger than humans. Even the rats were scared away, which undoubtedly indicates that something more terrifying is about to come. For the sake of safety, I decided to leave this place as soon as possible. Since the rats had disappeared without a trace, the problem of the rat infestation was naturally solved. Therefore, the rat-killing team was immediately disbanded. I quickly found my wife and urged her to pack our luggage quickly. At the same time, I told the child to hold black and yellow and go back to our residence first and wait for my further notice. At this moment, I was extremely anxious, and the only thought in my mind was to escape from this ominous place as soon as possible and return to my rural hometown. 5. The villagers at the scene were uneasy, all feeling that something bad was about to happen, yet no one knew exactly what it would be. This uncertainty led to panic spreading rapidly among the villagers. In order to find answers and soothe their inner unease, some villagers spontaneously organized and went to find Graham, the manager of Area C. Facing the villagers' concerns and a series of questions, Graham called on everyone to stay calm and promised to conduct a thorough investigation into the causes of this series of events. He loudly said to the villagers, "Please don't panic. We will do our best to find out what exactly happened. Please trust us, now. Please go back to your respective work positions and wait patiently for the results of our investigation. It's extremely cold outside now, and you won't be able to survive if you go out rashly. At this critical moment, we need to unite as one, face it together, and strive to find out the reasons." Then, Graham was about to lead several people to dig deeper into those rat holes, hoping to find out what secrets were hidden in them. However, just as they were about to take action, Lennox stepped in to stop them in time. Although we don't know exactly what Lennox and Graham talked about, in the end, they decided to mobilize all the villagers again, carefully search for the rat holes together, and continue to use the method of pouring cement into the holes to block them. Their goal was that no matter what secrets were hidden in the holes, they must never let it have the chance to escape, because in such extremely cold weather, if a catastrophic event occurs and a large number of people rush out of the rescue center at the same time without being fully prepared, it will only lead to the tragic outcome of everyone freezing to death outside. After the rats fled from Area C, we had no idea where they had gone. Since they had already escaped from Area C, this problem was then handed over to other relevant areas for handling. Graham had already reported this situation to the superior in a timely manner and was waiting for further instructions. At the same time, in Area C, we organized another carpet-like search, aiming to carefully look for any rat holes that might have been missed. Whenever a new hole was found, we would immediately pour cement to seal it tightly. As for me, I had already started secretly planning to leave this place. I didn't have many personal belongings here. When I was transferred to the rescue center, I brought a lot of stored food with me and handed it over to the Center for Unified Management. However, in my old house in the countryside outside, I had also secretly stored some food as a backup resource for unexpected situations. However, facing the current extreme cold weather, it was impossible to walk back home alone. Therefore, I had to find a way to obtain a snow-armored vehicle, fortunately, as a transporter. I had previously received training in operating this modified vehicle and was also proficient in driving this special vehicle. Perhaps it was a psychological effect, or perhaps it was the fear deep in my heart that was driving me. I always felt that even though there were many busy villagers around, this place was extremely quiet and made people feel scared. After confirming that all the discovered rat holes had been sealed tightly and no accidents had occurred during this period, the villagers began to eat and rest one after another. After the meal, I found Lennox again to discuss. At that time, several other villagers were also present. As soon as Lennox saw me, he blurted out, "I was just about to send someone to look for you, and here you come by yourself. Everyone feels that something is going to happen, right?" "I'm really uneasy," I replied. Lennox also seemed a bit anxious. He said hastily, "Time is running out, and we must make a decision quickly. The current question is whether everyone is willing to stay in the rescue center or go back to our own village. There are still some supplies in the village. If we choose to leave, we should be able to take away some warm clothes and necessary tools. With these equipment, it's not impossible for us to live in the village." Lennox's words were straightforward, but the villagers present had serious differences of opinion. Some people firmly believed that the rescue center had more people and more strength, and it was relatively safer. Moreover, the center was equipped with many modern facilities, which were sufficient to deal with various emergencies. However, there were also some people who firmly insisted on leaving. Their reason was, the rats were willing to risk freezing to death to escape, which indicates that there may be extremely serious problems underground, in case something uncontrollable happens. We would rather die in our own homes. In the end, there was an obvious divergence of opinions, forming two factions. One faction chose to stay in the rescue center, and this faction was in the majority. The other faction insisted on leaving no matter what. I added at last, based on my careful observation during this period, there are still many survivors on the ground. They seem to be reluctant to enter the underground rescue center and only exchange supplies with the center when necessary. In the future, we can also consider adopting this method to obtain the necessary supplies. After in-depth discussion and weighing, the people who finally decided to leave included Lennox, Soren, me, and some other villagers, totaling about 40 people. We estimated that we would need 2 armored vehicles to carry all the people and necessary supplies. Then, we found Graham, the manager of Area C, and discussed with him the matter of leaving the rescue center. Graham did not deliberately obstruct us, but the number of armored vehicles was indeed limited at present. In addition, although we had carried a large amount of grain when we moved in, it had all been handed over to the warehouse, and the amount of grain that we could take away now was relatively limited. He informed us that if we decided to leave the rescue center, we could wait for the opportunity to take a ride when there was an external rescue mission. After all, the vehicles were in short supply, and there were still many people waiting for rescue outside. They could make a detour during the rescue mission, send us away first, and then go to rescue others. He also generously said that although the amount of grain we were allowed to take away was not much, we could take more daily tools for emergency use. However, Graham did not want me to leave for the time being, because there was a serious shortage of people who could drive these special vehicles. He asked me to wait for a while until someone who could replace me was found, and then arrange for me to leave. I readily agreed to this request without hesitation. After all, time was of the essence, and the sooner I left this place, the better. As long as I could ensure the safe evacuation of my wife and child, I would be satisfied. Subsequently, Lennox and the others began to sort out their personal belongings. Graham also provided some additional warm clothes and special tools. Although he was indeed rather stingy when it came to grain, but these special tools were of great importance to us, because they could work normally in a low-temperature environment and would not become brittle and break easily like ordinary iron tools in the cold. In this way, even outdoors, everyone could carry out some basic labor to ensure the basic living and production needs. I still felt an urgent sense in my heart, because I always had a premonition that a great horror was about to come. Therefore, I eagerly accompanied my wife, Lennox, and the others, waiting for the arrival of the armored vehicle. During this period, some other villagers in Area C also wanted to leave, and they gradually gathered around us. Graham did not stop them. He respected everyone's independent choice, but he clearly told everyone that once they left this place, it meant giving up the opportunity to enter the rescue center again. Everyone had no objections to this, however. Due to the limited number of armored vehicles and the increasing number of gathered villagers, Graham arranged some people to maintain order to ensure that the villagers could queue up in an orderly manner and wait for the dispatch of the vehicles, and corresponding supplies were also provided for each team preparing to leave. I waited anxiously for several hours. It was not until I saw my wife, child, and Lennox board the armored vehicle and drive away from the rescue center that I finally felt a little relieved. I specifically instructed my wife to take the child and stay with Lennox and the others at the village brigade, and repeatedly told them to follow Lennox's arrangements no matter what happened. However, shortly after they left, an abnormal sound suddenly came from underground. This sound made my heart, which had just relaxed, tense up again. 6. Suddenly, a barely perceptible slight vibration quietly spread from the abyss beneath the ground, as if the earth itself was shuddering. This vibration carried a mysterious and hidden rhythm, causing everyone to unconsciously focus and listen attentively, trying to catch a glimpse of what was going on. At the same time, along with this strange vibration, a faint but continuous sound of digging began to be heard. This sound was like countless small claws scratching rapidly in the soil, and also like the teeth of countless small animals biting frantically, making people feel extremely creepy. It was sometimes clearly audible, as if right next to the ear, and sometimes indistinct, as if far away. A nauseating stench filled the surrounding air. This stench was also mixed with the smell of damp soil and a strong musty smell. These smells seemed to be stirred up by the digging sound underground, like awakened demons slowly rising from the cracks in the ground and permeating every corner. This atmosphere made people feel extremely oppressed and scared. Suddenly, a panicked cry burst out from the crowd. "Help, what the hell is biting me?" I looked in the direction of the sound and saw several unknown creatures not far away. They seemed to have crawled out of the abyss of hell, with huge and distorted bodies, several times larger than ordinary rats. Although at first glance they still retained the basic outline of a rat, upon closer inspection, many subtle differences could be found, and these differences together constituted an indescribable horror. On these creatures, instead of the smooth and delicate fur of a rat, there were densely covered small tentacles resembling branches. These tentacles trembled slightly, as if exploring the surrounding air. Each one was extremely sensitive and at the same time exuded an ominous feeling, making people shudder. Even more terrifying was that these creatures were covered all over with mold spots, which exuded a putrid smell, just like moldy food that had been left for a long time, making people want to stay away. The mold spots formed a sharp contrast with their blood-red bodies, as if there were strange and beautiful flowers blooming on a piece of rotten land, both strange and soul-stirring. These creatures were blood-red all over, and it was unclear whether it was stained with blood or the color of their skin itself. That red color gave people a strong sense of unease, as if they had just come out of a bloody massacre, or perhaps they themselves contained the intention of endless killing. These monsters slowly crawled out of the ground. Although their movements were slower than those of rats, their aggression was extremely strong. One of them had already knocked down a person and was biting him frantically on the body. This was exactly the poor man who had cried for help. The crowd suddenly fell into chaos, and screams rang out one after another. Several brave and strong men stepped forward and, holding various tools, bravely fought against these monsters. They smashed at the monsters violently, trying to repel them. "Don't be afraid, these are just a few big rats that have become spirits," a man shouted to encourage everyone. "I've really opened my eyes today. There are actually such strangely shaped big rats in the world." However, his words were constantly interspersed with the screams of other people. Obviously, someone else had been bitten by the monsters. A strong man smashed a rat-shaped monster flat, thinking that it was dead, so he relaxed his vigilance. Suddenly, he let out a scream. "Ah, ah, ah." It turned out that the rat-shaped monster was not completely dead. Instead, it bit his leg. The strong man endured the intense pain, swung the tool in his hand, and smashed the head of the rat-shaped monster hard again. This time, he used all his strength. With a dull thud, the head of the rat-shaped monster was instantly smashed to pieces, and it completely lost its signs of life. Fortunately, the number of these rat-shaped monsters was not large. Under the brave resistance of the strong men, the monsters were quickly eliminated one by one. However, this chaotic battle still resulted in several people being injured, and two of them were particularly seriously injured. Their chests were torn open, and blood was gushing out. Graham quickly arranged for me to send the injured to the medical area for treatment and casually handed me a machete, saying, "I can't give you a gun, I found this machete for you." just in case. I silently took the machete without saying much. Then, I carefully carried the injured on my back and placed them safely in the transport vehicle. After ensuring that they were seated firmly, I immediately started the vehicle and drove towards the medical area quickly and smoothly. I silently prayed in my heart, hoping that all the injured could receive timely treatment and get through this difficult time safely. In this apocalyptic background, the professional quality and calmness of the management personnel are indeed commendable, while quickly reporting this sudden situation to the superior. Graham also did not forget to soothe the frightened villagers and ensure the stability of the overall situation. I followed Graham's instructions strictly and drove the injured villagers to the medical area without stopping. This whole day, we first encountered the unexpected rat infestation, and then witnessed the strange disappearance of those rats. After seeing off my wife, Lennox, and other villagers, we unexpectedly encountered this group of huge monsters resembling rats. The busy and tense day finally ended. When I safely sent all the injured to the medical area, I was finally able to take a short rest. Exhausted, I asked Graham if there were any other tasks for today. After getting a negative answer, I dozed off in the transport vehicle parked beside the medical room. This way, when their treatment was over, they could just wake me up, and then I would drive them back to Area C. Although the wounds of the injured looked shocking, I believed that with the professional treatment of the doctors, they should be able to recover and there would be no major problems. 7. I slept deeply, and both my body and mind were immersed in extreme fatigue, as if isolated from the whole world. However, suddenly, I was awakened by a commotion. Due to extreme sleepiness, I did not sit up immediately. Instead, after gradually regaining consciousness, I began to pay attention to the movements around me. Ear-piercing screams filled my ears. Full of fear and panic, the originally stable lights also began to flicker, alternating between bright and dark, adding a mysterious and uneasy atmosphere to this chaotic scene. Many people rushed out of the medical room in a panic, and fear was clearly written on their faces. The sounds of footsteps, cries, and collisions came one after another, as if playing a thrilling symphony, echoing continuously in the night. I looked into the distance in confusion and saw a group of terrifying figures swarming towards us. Their bodies were twisted, as if they had lost control of themselves, and the distorted expressions on their faces were extremely terrifying. The people around began to run around in a panic, trying to avoid the crazy pursuit of these monsters. However, some people were unable to avoid them and were suddenly knocked down by the monsters. Then, there were spine-chilling sounds of biting and the desperate screams of people. What on earth are these monsters? I was horrified in my heart and woke up with a start. Due to the excessive movement, my head accidentally hit a hard object in the vehicle. Ah, I exclaimed in pain. A sharp pain made me gasp involuntarily. I rubbed my aching forehead and slowly came back to my senses. It turned out that the thrilling scene just now was actually just a dream. I felt that my back was soaked through. Unable to tell whether it was sweat or because of the fear in the dream, I pushed open the car door and got out of the transport vehicle. At this moment, all drowsiness was gone. I stretched myself and looked around. The cool breeze gently blew across my face. Ah, it's so comfortable, I exclaimed sincerely as I stretched my body. However, somehow, I suddenly shivered. I looked around and found that it was extremely quiet around, and there was no one in sight. This kind of stillness made me feel a little uneasy, as if something unknown was watching me in the dark. I tightened my collar and began to observe the surrounding environment alertly. Suddenly, a young girl in a medical staff uniform rushed towards me in a hurry from the direction of the medical room. She came up to me and asked, "Hello, are you the driver from Area C?" "Yes, I just sent several injured people in. How are they now? When can I pick them up and go back?" I asked eagerly. The young girl looked hesitant, paused for a moment, and then said in a low voice, "They can't go back, can't go back." "What do you mean?" I was very surprised and asked in confusion. "Two of them just had minor skin injuries. Does it take a long time to deal with minor skin injuries? If it takes too long, I'll go back to Area C to rest first and come back to pick them up when they're better." While we were talking, several more medical staff wearing full-body protective suits rushed over in a hurry. They said nervously, "The people who were sent in earlier have all passed away. We don't know what virus they were infected with, but the condition deteriorated very rapidly. In order to prevent the further spread of the virus, you have to go with us to Area C for disinfection work." "What? Weren't they fine before? How could even minor skin injuries become so fatal?" I asked in astonishment. Filled with confusion and fear in my heart, yes, when they were sent in, their wounds seemed not serious, but then they quickly had a large-scale infection and finally couldn't make it, a medical staff member added sadly. Then, an armored vehicle fully equipped with supplies rushed over. We quickly got on the vehicle and rushed towards Area C in a hurry. 8. In the vehicle, I tried to contact Graham, the manager of Area C. Again, I originally wanted to briefly report the situation to him. But his phone was no longer answered. Before we reached Area C, we heard a strong and piercing alarm sound from a distance, and at the same time, we saw the lights flashing continuously at a high frequency. All this made me feel very uneasy, so I accelerated the speed of the vehicle. When I arrived at the gate of Area C, I was surprised to find that Area C had been completely sealed off. There was no one outside. I was just about to get out of the vehicle to check the situation when I was stopped by a medical staff member. "Don't get out," she said seriously. She pointed at the flashing lights and explained, "The red and black lights are flashing alternately. Red means danger and urgency, and black means that the situation has deteriorated to an irreversible extent, which usually indicates that the people inside have little chance of survival." I asked in, "What did you say?" "The people inside have little chance of survival." "How do you know this?" My heart was filled with fear and confusion, the medical staff explained to me. "This is the highest level isolation signal established when the underground rescue center was built, indicating that an extremely terrible event has occurred inside. How can you be so heartless?" I questioned angrily. "Once it's sealed, there may still be survivors inside. How can they get out?" The medical staff's eyes reddened slightly. She held back her emotions and said, "Graham is my younger brother. Only he has the authority to activate this alarm. Once the alarm is activated, it means that the people inside can't escape, including himself. Sealing off the area is not ignoring the lives of the people inside, but to prevent the disaster from spreading to other areas, protect the people outside, and buy more time for the people outside to deal with and defend against it." "What exactly happened inside?" I asked eagerly, wanting to get more information. "What do you know?" "We don't know the specific situation either," the medical staff replied with a slightly choked voice. "It may be a virus infection, or it may be some other similar disaster. The injured you sent in, we have never seen them before, but we're not sure if it's a virus. After all, there are no professional virus researchers here. Maybe, there are other possibilities." At the end, the medical staff's eyes were red and her voice was filled with deep sadness and worry. Just as the medical staff was explaining, a dense burst of gunshots suddenly sounded behind the heavy isolation door, along with the low growls of beasts and the miserable cries of the crowd. Even more terrifying was that, along with the sound of the violent impact on the isolation door, the thick door was actually shaking. The situation inside was a mystery, but obviously, some extremely terrifying existence was raging within. At this moment, several soldiers quickly jumped out of the armored vehicle. They urged us to evacuate quickly, claiming that this place was no longer safe and revealing that they had received the latest instructions to further isolate this area. I couldn't help but ask them, "Since it's so dangerous, why don't you leave?" I was filled with worry in my heart. The soldiers looked determined and replied, "The people inside have already made sacrifices. Our task is to complete the further isolation work to prevent the situation from deteriorating further. It is our duty to protect the people, and we will never back down." In such a situation, I had no choice but to drive the medical staff back to the medical area in a hurry. However, the doubts and fears in my heart lingered like a shadow. I only hoped that those brave soldiers could return safely. 9. Under my strong request, Bianca, Graham's sister, finally agreed to take me with her to visit those deceased villagers who were placed in the laboratory. After all, we had lived together in Area C for a while, and I wanted to offer my last condolences to them. Due to the discovery of an unknown infection on these remains, they had not been immediately burned and destroyed but were properly stored in the laboratory for further study. When the door slowly opened and Bianca led me into the laboratory, an unbearable stench rushed towards us, making us want to vomit. I was deeply shocked by the scene in front of me, and fear welled up in my heart like a tide. Bianca let out an "ah" and exclaimed, "There have been changes again." I originally thought there were just a few bodies lying still, and I could say goodbye to them and that would be it, since we had known each other. But what came into view was a pile of humanoid monsters. Their bodies seemed to have a strange fusion with some kind of plants or animals. and long and twisted tentacles grew out of them. These tentacles were like branches, forked, and the ends were as sharp as needles, looking extremely strange. Even more terrifying was that some of the tentacles had even penetrated the solid cement walls of the laboratory and extended deep into the ground, as if establishing a connection with some mysterious force beneath the earth. I was horrified to find that the faces of these corpses had also been distorted, their eyes had turned blood red, their mouths were open, and their fangs were exposed, as if they were grinning hideously, mocking our ignorance and powerlessness. The entire laboratory at this moment seemed to have become a terrifying lair, and those corpses had transformed into monsters in the lair, quietly waiting for their prey to throw themselves into the trap. Just then, a medical staff member let out a painful scream. It turned out that she had accidentally been pierced through the thigh by a tentacle. Blood flowed down the tentacle slowly and was actually absorbed by the tentacle. The blood seemed to arouse the violent nature of the tentacles. They began to twist and stretch frantically, as if they were going to devour the entire laboratory. The terrifying scene in front of me made me tremble all over, and fear spread through my body like an electric current. Suddenly, a tentacle lashed out at me. I stepped back in a panic, but I accidentally bumped into other tentacles. When the tentacles began to wrap around me, I quickly drew out the machete that Graham had given me. After all, I was a pork vendor, and I was quite skilled in using a knife. With a swing of the knife, I successfully cut off those tentacles. The cut tentacles quickly withered after losing their connection with the corpse. However, in this short moment, some other tentacles seemed to have a life of their own and tightly wrapped around Bianca, attempting to drag her into the pile of terrifying corpses, just as I saw her about to be dragged away. I immediately cut off the tentacles that were wrapped around her with the machete and successfully saved Bianca. As for the medical staff member who had been injured before, she had already been dragged to the side of the corpse by the tentacles, and her body had become dry. I didn't dare to stay any longer. I grabbed Bianca and hurriedly fled outside. We escaped from the laboratory and closed the door tightly, finally sealing those terrifying monsters inside. Just then, a violent impact sound came from the door of the laboratory. A medical staff member who had not entered the laboratory asked in horror, "What's going on inside? Weren't there just a few corpses?" I replied in a trembling voice, "They don't seem to be dead. Instead, they have turned into something similar to plants." Seeing that the door of the laboratory was deforming and seemed to be broken open at any moment, I didn't have time to explain in detail. I grabbed Bianca and desperately ran towards the outside of the medical room. The sound of the laboratory door being broken open came from behind me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw that the humanoid monsters inside had stood up and were slowly moving outside, and they let out a roar. That roar was exactly the same as the one I had heard outside the closed door of Area C before. At this moment, there was only one thought in my mind: to escape from this terrifying place as soon as possible. However, on my way to the transport vehicle, Bianca gradually calmed down. She decided to stay and face this sudden disaster together with her colleagues. "I'm just an ordinary pork vendor. Don't accuse me of being selfish or cold-blooded. I'm just a small person. Saving the world is not my ideal, and I'm not that noble. Everyone has their own choices, right?" So, when she decided to stay, I didn't hesitate at all and continued to run towards my transport vehicle alone. After getting into the vehicle, I felt the vibration from the abyss beneath the ground again. I admit that I don't have the courage to face those terrifying monsters. I just want to do my best to live well and spend the rest of my life with my family. Therefore, I didn't hesitate to start the transport vehicle and drive away at full speed. During the escape, I also saw many armed soldiers walking in the opposite direction. They bravely faced those monsters, while I could only choose to escape. At this moment, I really didn't have the courage to fight side by side with them. On the way of escape, more and more big rats covered with mold spots emerged from the ground, and humanoid monsters that crawled out of the rat holes also appeared. They were exactly the same as the corpse monsters in the laboratory. Even some monsters had pounced on the advancing young soldiers and started biting them frantically. I immediately understood the reason why Area C was sealed off. It turned out that after I left, it had become a living hell. My transport vehicle kept running over the monsters on the road that blocked the way. Whether they were rats or humanoid monsters, they were all mercilessly crushed under the wheels. The vehicle only shook slightly a few times and was not seriously damaged. Not long after driving out, I heard the ear-piercing alarm sound behind me and felt the continuous high-frequency flashing of the lights. I knew that the medical area was also about to be sealed off. and I'm afraid no one inside could survive. So, I stepped on the accelerator hard and accelerated to escape from this terrifying place. There was only one thought in my mind: I want to live. At this time, the broadcast sound of the entire rescue center rang out: emergency evacuation. Emergency evacuation. Unknown creatures have been found in the rescue center. Emergency evacuation, and I had successfully escaped to the exit of the underground rescue center at this moment. 10. In the extreme cold of 80 degrees below zero, the exit of the rescue center seemed to become a line between life and death. There was no snow falling outside, only the biting cold wind howling past, as if even the air had been frozen. Strict control measures had been implemented at the exit of the rescue center. A team of soldiers wearing special polar cold-resistant suits stood upright there. These high-tech suits allowed them to stick to their posts in such extremely low temperatures. Nevertheless, the severe cold still mercilessly left frost marks on their faces and cold-resistant suits. Every breath they took would spray out a noticeable white mist. Their eyebrows and beards were all covered with ice crystals. But this did not affect their maintenance of the order at the scene at all. While waiting for the inspection, I looked around and found that there were many people like me who had chosen to evacuate quickly because they sensed that the situation was not right. There was tension and expectation written on everyone's faces, hoping to pass the inspection as soon as possible and leave this place. At the exit of the rescue center, the crowd surged like a tide, all fleeing. However, in sharp contrast to this flow of people fleeing, there were those soldiers who walked in the opposite direction without fear and marched forward bravely. They were fearless. Team after team moved towards the depths of the crisis, ready for action, and were more fully equipped than usual, like an indestructible steel great wall, as far as my eyes could see, in addition to the conventional weapons and equipment. I also saw high-tech equipment such as mechanical dogs and drones that I had not seen before. Under the control of the soldiers, they flexibly carried out various reconnaissance and auxiliary tasks. The tanks in the distance were also on standby, and their thick armor and powerful gun barrels demonstrated strong combat readiness capabilities, giving people a sense of inexplicable security. In this tense and orderly environment, a young soldier suddenly jumped onto my transport vehicle. He had a young face, but his eyes were firm and sharp. He carefully examined my body, as if looking for something. He explained that if a wound was found, I would need to be compulsorily isolated to prevent the further spread of the virus. Listening to his explanation, I realized that these soldiers might know more about the current situation. After he carefully examined my body, he seemed to heave a sigh of relief. Then, he suddenly asked, "Which area are you from?" I replied, "Area C." After hearing this, he showed an incredulous expression and blurted out, "You're actually the survivor from Area C that we've been looking for. Our captain wants to talk to you and learn about the situation in Area C." I replied somewhat helplessly, "Actually, I don't know the situation in Area C either. I'm just an ordinary villager from Area C and don't know the specific situation there." Well, under his guidance, I drove the transport vehicle through the chaotic crowd and came to a vehicle that was like a mobile command post. This command post vehicle had a sturdy and huge appearance. Inside the vehicle, various communication devices and electronic screens were flashing with lights. Several large screens were hung in the mobile command post, and they were playing real-time images of various corners of the rescue center. I stared closely at the screens, my heart beating faster, eagerly searching for any clues about the current situation. Suddenly, the image displayed on one of the screens made me freeze instantly. It was the medical area, where I had parked briefly before. On the screen, the medical area that had originally been clean and orderly had now become a chaotic hell. Those medical staff who should have been protecting lives had now turned into staggering and unsteady monsters. They were wearing tattered medical uniforms, looking extremely strange on the screen. These monsters, although their movements were a bit slow, exuded a strong threat with every bite. The fleeing crowd looked so vulnerable in front of them, and the soldiers in the distance did not flinch at all, bravely engaging in a life-and-death battle with these monsters. Gunfire was like a shower of bullets pouring down on the monsters. Whenever a bullet hit, the body of the monster would spasm, and the hit part would shatter and break. However, the recovery ability of these monsters was astonishing. The broken part would quickly dry up and fall off, and at the same time, new limbs would grow out at an amazing speed to fill the wound. Those medical staff who had once sworn to protect lives had now turned into terrifying monsters with an immortal body, which made me feel unprecedented fear and despair. 11. Just as I was deeply shocked by this terrifying scene and was still in a state of unease, the captain of the young soldier came up to me. He asked in a low voice, "Are you Griffin from Area C?" That's me," I quickly replied, while trying my best to calm the fluctuations in my heart and maintain my composure. "According to our understanding, you're the only survivor from Area C," the captain said seriously, "and, coincidentally, your wife and child left Area C before the incident occurred and went to other safe places." The captain's sharp gaze fell on me, and I actually started to tremble involuntarily. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions, and then replied, "It's really all coincidences, then." I began to recall and describe in detail the experience of Area C, from the initial rampant rat infestation, to the sudden appearance of those huge rats covered with mold spots, and then to the villagers being bitten one after another and sent to the medical area. I tried my best to describe every detail. As I was talking, the captain's face became more and more serious. He muttered to himself, "The speed of change is getting faster and faster." I couldn't help but ask curiously, "What speed of change is getting faster and faster?" The captain explained, "From being bitten to turning into this state of a walking corpse, the transformation time is constantly shortening. According to our observation, in the beginning in Area C, this transformation process took several hours, but now, it can be completed in just a few minutes. This increase in speed is really astonishing. What exactly are these things? Do you know?" I asked eagerly. Filled with confusion and unease in my heart, the captain shook his head helplessly, his brows furrowed tightly. "We don't know either. It was only when Graham, the manager of Area C, activated the alarm that we received the relevant information and started receiving the real-time images from there. In fact, you knew all this earlier than us. You can still see the current images of Area C?" I asked in surprise, an inexplicable tension surging in my heart. "Yes." The captain pointed at a screen and said, "This is the current surveillance image of Area C." His voice was filled with a sense of heaviness and helplessness. I looked in the direction he pointed and saw that the screen showed a desolate and dilapidated scene, which was completely different from the Area C in my memory that was full of vitality. I was stunned, unable to believe my eyes. "This is Area C. How can this be Area C?" "Unfortunately, the situation has indeed developed to a point beyond our imagination," the captain said heavily. His eyes were filled with worry and helplessness. "But this is the current Area C, a fact that we can't change." The reason why I was so shocked was that the scene in front of me was completely different from the Area C in my memory. Those familiar buildings and kind people were all gone, replaced by a desolate, dilapidated, and silent scene. This huge gap made me unable to accept it, and my heart was filled with pain and despair. Even more astonishing to me was that a strange giant mushroom-like object appeared in the center of Area C. It emerged from the ground, huge and deformed, almost occupying half of Area C. This giant mushroom-like object had an extremely terrifying appearance. It was formed by countless seemingly dead people stacked closely together. These people seemed to have merged and transformed into a new and terrifying form of life. These corpses were not simply stacked, but were connected to each other in a strange way. Their bodies were closely attached layer by layer, with no gaps between each layer, as if they were a whole, and the tentacles that grew out of the corpses were swaying slightly in the air, as if exploring something, giving people a strange and uneasy feeling, although their faces were distorted and terrifying. What was even more chilling was that these corpses seemed to still be breathing. Their chests rose and fell gently at the same frequency, as if being manipulated by a mysterious force. This breathing movement gave them a strange and terrifying vitality. The entire Area C was extremely quiet at the moment, without any sound, but this deathly silence revealed a strange and terrifying atmosphere that was even more chilling than the tragic situation in the medical area. I could almost feel the icy breath emanating from that giant mushroom formed by the corpses, which silently penetrated through the screen and eroded my mind. I couldn't imagine that the corpses of those once kind neighbors and friends had now been stacked into this giant mushroom. I didn't know if they had completely died or had obtained some new, distorted form of life in this way. The eerie existence of this giant mushroom made me deeply feel the interweaving of fear and despair. Its existence not only subverted my perception of the world but also filled me with questions and unease about the future. I couldn't imagine what the world would become after being completely changed by the extreme cold. What kind of situation would Lennox, my wife, and the others face after they fled from here? Were they safe? Could they adapt to this new world full of unknowns? These questions lingered in my mind, making me unable to calm down. 12. Seeing these spine-chilling scenes. A strong sense of unease welled up in my heart. The sight in front of me was beyond my understanding. I just wanted to escape this place as soon as possible and find my wife and child to ensure their safety. I've told you everything I know. I really can't be of any other help. I tentatively asked. Well, can I leave now? The captain looked at me firmly and said, you can leave at any time. But it's my duty to eliminate those monsters and protect everyone's safety. He paused for a moment and then continued, however, before you leave, I have a few questions to ask you. My heart tightened, and I could only nod and reply, go ahead. The captain asked, what do you think these monsters we saw are? Are they a virus, bacteria, or something else? I shook my head helplessly and answered, are you kidding me? If you don't know, I definitely don't know what this is. The captain nodded and continued to ask, do you think these monsters are infectious? Do you think they can be transmitted to humans? I said impatiently, obviously, they are infectious. Haven't you seen that the people who were bitten or had wound contact have also turned into monsters? The captain nodded and continued to ask, is it only through being bitten or wound contact that people can be infected? I furrowed my brows and replied, who knows, biting and wound contact are just the ways we've discovered so far. As for whether there are other transmission routes, no one knows. Suddenly, the captain changed the topic and stared at me, saying, you want to leave here to find your wife and child, right? I quickly replied, yes, I'm worried about their safety and want to be reunited with them as soon as possible. But as soon as the words were out of my mouth, I fell into deep thought. Yes, since I didn't know all the transmission routes of these monsters. If I left rashly and happened to be carrying the virus, wouldn't I infect my wife and child? Thinking of this, panic welled up in my heart again. Seeing that I was silent, the captain continued, if you want to leave, go and be reunited with your wife and child. I looked up at the captain, smiled, and said, Captain, I also want to do my part for the country, although I don't have any great abilities. I also want to do my bit to defend our homeland. The captain also smiled and said, aren't you going to find your wife and child? I looked firmly at the captain and said, in the face of such a major disaster, I can't be so selfish. I want to be like you, defend our homeland. A glimmer of approval flashed in the captain's eyes. He patted me on the shoulder and said, very good, your decision is wise. We'll work together and definitely get through this difficult time. After eliminating those monsters, we can go home and be reunited with our wives and children. The captain then asked me, do you want a gun? I said nervously, I don't know how to use that thing. Graham gave me a machete, and it's very useful. As I spoke, I took out the machete and showed it to the captain. The captain touched the machete and smiled. That's good, use the machete for self-defense. I asked in confusion, why choose me? The captain asked, why did everyone in Area C die, but you're still alive? I scratched my head and said, maybe it's fate. The captain also sighed and said, I also think it's fate. After being questioned by the captain, I left his command vehicle and was placed in a temporary shelter. This shelter was filled with many people who had escaped from the rescue center. The temperature in the shelter was very low, and the cold air filled every corner. However, fortunately, the soldiers had prepared some warmer cold-resistant clothes for everyone, allowing us to feel a little warmth in this severe cold. For now, it seemed that we all had to stay here temporarily. I hope these soldiers can eliminate those monsters. 13. In the temporarily built shelter, we sat around and shared our experiences. Some people told of the helplessness of their homes being destroyed, some recounted the pain of being separated from their loved ones, and others recalled the thrilling battles with the monsters. Suddenly, the gunshots outside got closer and louder, and the sharp sound pierced the silence of the night. Our hearts tightened, and we understood that those terrifying monsters had approached the entrance. Fear spread rapidly in the shelter, and worry was written all over everyone's face. Even more terrifying things happened. Those soldiers who had just entered the rescue center to bravely fight the monsters to protect their homeland were now infected and turned into monsters. They moved expressionlessly towards the exit and began to attack their former comrades. Their eyes became empty, as if they had lost their souls. The soldiers, with heavy hearts, resolutely raised their weapons to try to stop the attack of these monsters. However, their bullets seemed to have little effect on the monsters. The recovery ability of these monsters seemed to have been further enhanced. No matter how much the soldiers shot, they could quickly recover and continue to launch attacks, seeing that the entrance was in a precarious situation. The front line soldiers were forced to retreat. At this time, the tank rushed out, took on the heavy responsibility of defense, and began to shell those monsters. The power of the shells was indeed huge, shattering the monsters, but despairingly, the monsters in the tunnel seemed to be endless. As soon as one batch was eliminated, a new batch immediately rushed forward. In this urgent situation, the captain decisively ordered the use of incendiary bombs. The incendiary bombs exploded in the tunnel, and a sea of fire instantly engulfed the tunnel. Filled with the shrill screams of the monsters, just when we thought victory was just around the corner, the ground where the tank and armored vehicles were located suddenly began to shake violently. Those terrifying rat-like monsters and humanoid monsters appeared again. They braved the cold wind and crawled out from the depths of the ground, clearly aiming at the tank and armored vehicles at the entrance to launch an attack. These monsters began to besiege the tank and armored vehicles frantically and showed a strange ability to merge. They gradually merged from individual entities into a huge combined body, erupting with astonishing destructive power. Under the crazy siege of the monsters, the tank and armored vehicles gradually lost their mobility. After the monsters merged, they actually extended huge tentacles similar to tree branches. These tentacles tightly wrapped around the tank and armored vehicles, as if with an irresistible force, smashing them hard on the ground. Then, the tentacles wrapped around the tank and armored vehicles again and slowly dragged them towards the depths of the tunnel, directly targeting the interior of the rescue center. We watched helplessly as the tank and armored vehicles were completely dragged into the tunnel and disappeared into the darkness. Subsequently, we witnessed an incredible scene. The tank and armored vehicles seemed to be lifted up by an invisible giant hand, smashed hard on the ground, and then slowly dragged into the depths of the tunnel. After that, the situation at the entrance of the tunnel became more and more serious. More and more monsters merged and continuously gathered at the entrance of the tunnel. They were like fillers, gradually filling the tunnel entrance. These monsters were densely packed and finally completely blocked the tunnel entrance. When everything returned to calm, the ground was in a mess, and the fragments of the tank and armored vehicles were scattered everywhere, as if silently telling the fierce battle that had just taken place. And those monsters that had been extremely fierce before were now lying broken on the ground, motionless, as if they had lost their lives and vitality in the cold wind. The entrance of the rescue center was completely sealed by some unknown substance, and its hardness was beyond imagination. The soldiers tried various means of destruction, but with little effect. This was mainly because this substance was not only extremely hard but also had amazing self-repair ability. After that, we didn't know exactly how the soldiers dealt with the situation on the scene. The only thing we knew was that the entire scene was sealed off, and all of us were quickly and orderly transferred to another unfinished shelter. In that shelter, we were isolated separately and underwent long-term medical observation. During the isolation period, the atmosphere was tense and oppressive, and time seemed to pass extremely slowly. However, fortunately, after a long-term and detailed observation, none of us showed any symptoms of illness, and everyone remained healthy. After ensuring our physical safety, the relevant parties asked us to sign a non-disclosure agreement, promising never to disclose anything that happened in the rescue center. After signing the non-disclosure agreement, I decided to give up the opportunity to enter the rescue center again and choose to return to my hometown to be reunited with my wife and children. The moment I returned to my hometown, I felt an unprecedented sense of relaxation and freedom, as if I had taken off a heavy burden. Perhaps because the difficult days were about to pass, the outside temperature was gradually rising. Although it was still a bit chilly, the people in the village could already carry out some simple production activities. Dozens of people in our village began to live a self-sufficient and peaceful life, and hope was reignited in everyone's hearts. Whenever I recall that thrilling experience in the rescue center, I feel extremely fortunate to have escaped alive. At the same time, I cherish every beautiful moment of being with my family even more. Of course, I have never revealed a single word about those monster-related things that happened in the rescue center to the villagers. I just told them that there was a serious rat infestation there, and finally, the rescue center had to be abandoned, and this secret, like a nightmare, was deeply buried in my heart. And that disaster that occurred in the underground rescue center was of such great severity and influence that it far exceeded our imagination. It was not just the destruction of a rescue center but also an important turning point in human history. This disaster was later called the epic catastrophe by people. From this moment on, humanity was forced to step into a new era. This era was full of challenges and uncertainties, and it might even completely end human civilization. Full text ends. Note 1, Virus File, Virus Name, Fusion Symbiotic Virus, FSV for short, Characteristic Description. FSV is a special virus that specifically infects mammals. Its uniqueness lies in that all individuals infected by the same parent body will eventually form a strange symbiotic relationship of fusion with the parent body. 1. Infection mechanism. FSV spreads through the blood of mammals. Once it enters the host's body, it will quickly replicate and infect the host cells. In the initial stage of infection, FSV will lie dormant in the host's body, quietly manipulating the host's physiological functions to prepare for the subsequent fusion. Respiratory infection has not been confirmed, but it is extremely dangerous in a high concentration environment. 2. Fusion process. When multiple mammals are infected by the same parent body, FSV will stimulate a special biological signal, prompting these individuals to gather towards the parent body. Over time, a connecting tissue will begin to grow between the infected individuals and the parent body, gradually fusing into a larger organism. This process is accompanied by drastic physiological changes, but eventually, all individuals will lose their self-awareness and become an inseparable part of the parent body. 3. Nutrient absorption and supply. Once the fusion is completed, the new individual parts will no longer have independent physiological functions but will transform into a nutrient supplier for the parent body. Through the connecting tissue, the parent body can absorb nutrients, blood, and other essential substances for life from the fused parts to maintain its own survival and growth. This supply relationship is one way, and the parent body is the dominant party in this symbiotic relationship. 4. Changes in the parent body. As more and more individuals fuse, the parent body will gradually become huge and powerful, with stronger vitality and adaptability. The intelligence and perception ability of the parent body may also be enhanced, enabling it to better control and utilize the fused parts. 5. Social impact. The existence of FSV poses a huge threat to human society. It not only deprives individuals of their freedom and lives but may also disrupt the ecological balance and social stability. Once FSV breaks out, global emergency response measures will be required to prevent its spread and harm. 6. Evolution characteristics. In the initial stage of the fusion symbiotic virus, FSV, it mainly spreads through direct contact such as blood and body fluids. At this stage, although the virus is highly contagious, the transmission routes are relatively limited and require direct body fluid exchange or wound contact to cause infection. As the virus replicates and spreads, it mutates in some hosts. These mutations gradually enable the virus to spread through the air. This evolution is gradual. At first, it may only spread through droplets, and later it gradually evolves to be able to survive in the air for a longer time, even spreading through tiny aerosol particles. It is highly suspected that the parent body has a high level of intelligence and the ability to actively evolve. Survival temperature of the fusion symbiotic virus, FSV. 1. Optimum survival temperature. FSV shows the best survival and replication ability in the temperature range of 20 degrees Celsius to 37 degrees Celsius. This temperature range roughly corresponds to the normal body temperature of mammals and common environmental temperatures. 2. Survival ability in a low temperature environment. At lower temperatures, such as 4 degrees Celsius or lower, FSV can still survive, but its replication speed will be significantly slowed down. This low temperature survival ability allows the virus to remain active in a refrigerated environment, increasing the possibility of its spread and latency. In extreme cold, such as 70 degrees Celsius, the virus can enter a dormant state and be preserved for a long time without losing its activity, which provides the possibility for the long-term latency and future outbreak of the virus. 3. Inactivation in a high-temperature environment. When the temperature exceeds 56 degrees Celsius, the infectivity of FSV begins to decrease. At 60 degrees Celsius or higher for 30 minutes, the virus can be completely inactivated. This high temperature sensitivity enables conventional disinfection methods and the heating treatment when cooking food to effectively kill the virus. 4. Influence of environmental temperature changes on virus activity. In the process of the environmental temperature gradually rising, the activity of FSV will gradually increase until it reaches the most suitable temperature range. Conversely, when the temperature gradually decreases, the activity of the virus will weaken, but it will not be inactivated immediately. Note 2. The origin and transmission routes of the virus are still under continuous investigation and require further in-depth research and exploration. The currently verified situation is as follows. At the end of World War II, a secret organization named Shadow Council fled to Country M. During the in-depth study of ancient books, they accidentally discovered the record of a mysterious meteorite. It is said that this meteorite contains an unknown energy that can have a strange impact on the human body. The Shadow Council spared no expense and finally found this meteorite in the war ruins. After in-depth research on the meteorite, the scientists of the Shadow Council discovered an unprecedented bioactive substance in it. This substance has astonishing characteristics. It can fuse with biological cells, significantly enhance the vitality and adaptability of organisms, and even show amazing regeneration ability in some experiments. Therefore, the scientists named it Fusion Symbiotic Virus, FSV for short. After the end of the war, the world pattern changed, and the activities of the Shadow Council gradually came to light. The 5 major alliances of the United Nations began to notice the existence of this organization and the potential threat it posed. They found that the goal of the Shadow Council was ambitious and terrifying. They planned to reduce the world's population to 500 million to achieve their so-called holy country ambition. The 5 major alliances quickly took action, designated the Shadow Council as a cult organization, and carried out a severe crackdown on it. The Shadow Council was forced to go underground, but they did not give up the research on FSV. There was a serious split within the organization. Some members advocated controlling the use of FSV to reduce the population rather than completely eliminating all of humanity. However, this split did not stop the Shadow Council from continuing its secret experiments. Fast forward to 20XX, a sudden extreme electromagnetic storm swept across the globe, resulting in a large-scale power outage worldwide. In this chaos, an accident occurred in the underground laboratory of the Shadow Council, leading to the leakage of the FSV virus. Facing the impending crisis, the core members of the Shadow Council realized the seriousness of the situation, so they fled to various parts of the world, attempting to hide in the chaos and wait for the end of the world to come so that they could establish their holy country when the time was right.